What's up, ZBrush friends? Just getting my stuff all situated while y'all are jumping in. Give me a shout in the chat. Make sure, just want to check to make sure everybody can hear me okay. If it's all good, that'll be 2 for 2 with the quality audio check. All fine? Cool, thanks. Well, let's see here. We got a couple hours. If you're just checking out the stream, haven't seen it before, my name is Solomon. I'm a developer at Pixelogic. I'm working on a 4-part series here that I started about a month back or so. And I guess before I get started too, just want to give a shout out to everyone, make sure everyone's okay. Hope you all are safe. Those of us at Pixelogic are doing fine. We got a lot of office space here. We all have individual spaces, so I'm working out of my office. Same as always, place of comfort and all that, which is nice. So while we're all sort of in this crazy time, at least we can all kind of share and continue working on ZBrush. Hopefully most of you guys have a setup at home. You can keep doing the stuff you always do. But I'm going to wrap up this part today, this 4-part series, which, let me go ahead and load up this page here. So if you go to ZBrushLive.com, you can go to the presenters page, and then in there you'll find my name. This series, just to preface real quick, all my previous streams and all the stuff that I've done so far is here. So this is a 4th part of the installation of this project-based series. So just doing this, cosplay fan art piece for the Mandalorian. So doing a project in ZBrush that I'm going through and setting up for print. So if you want to check those 3 parts, those are all on YouTube. Those are going to be there forever, so you can always go back and rewatch them. We're getting a lot of great feedback and comments from all you guys. Winston, what's up from Seattle? How you doing, man? Hopefully things are good up there. Maybe, I don't know, this time of year if you guys have like good weather. Is it a rainy season right now or not? Because it's raining like crazy here in LA. Vichar, hello. Being Vichar, if maybe you'll notice in the back, I've got something draped on my chair over there. I hope you're well, man. I dropped you a message on Skype actually recently, but I haven't launched it up in a few, so I'm not sure if you replied. But if you did, I'll get back to you, I promise. So this series, we got 3 parts. You can check those out. A couple things going back to ZBrush here. You guys should see on your screens. We got ZBrush Core, flexible pricing. Also, Joseph Dressed somewhere about right there is going to be streaming on March 26th. So that's coming up pretty soon. If you guys want to check him out, Paul, Joseph, and myself have been trying to stream more a lot for the company to get more information out to you guys. So without any further ado. Oh yeah, SG Mechanic, you're welcome for the follow. Thank you for the follow. Yeah, all you guys, this project in particular, I've been trying to be more open and free to communicate with anybody who has questions or just wants to, connect or whatever. My personal Instagram is @SaulBlair. I'm on that a lot. My art is Sir Scallywag. If you follow me at SaulBlair, I'm there if you guys ever just want to chat or drop me a message or whatever. And one thing I'll say before I get started too, this project, if I go back to my browser, if you guys aren't on ZBC, we made a lot of improvements and changes to it. Those of us at Pixelogic are spending a lot more time in it now. I actually went in and decided to just break this stream down. So if you go to, if you guys want to follow me there too, I'd love to follow back and see all your work. But it's just Solomon_Blair. I made a post for this particular process, just breaking down kind of what's going on. So like what's happening in the first part. And then I've also posted the links to those videos too, if you guys want to check that out. Today we're kind of going to get to the final part, which is like the last part 3 stream. I spent a lot of time just blocking out and modeling all the parts. So we spent the first 3 doing the helmet and doing the shelling, which is a bit of a complicated process if you aren't familiar with it in ZBrush. Not so complicated, just more of like figuring out what the right process is. And so then last build was just making all the components. So now we got to set this stuff up for scale and actually get this stuff ready to print. So I got a couple pieces that I've been going through and making. Here's like a first panel. I'm going through and printing some of this stuff out, but I'm also having issues with the mail right now, trying to get materials sent. So it might be a month or 2 before I can actually have this thing done. But on ZBC, my plan is to do, because this stream is mostly about ZBrush. So for me, this is just a personal fun project to do. I'm using ZBrush to get this stuff out. And then I want to go through and like basically all 8 or 10 of these parts, I'm going to reassemble, sand it all down, paint it, try and get this to look like the I want it to look like the render that I've got here. So I want to do that as much as I can in the physical world. So that's the plan, and I'll be documenting all that stuff here on ZBC as I go through it. But yeah, well, I see. Listen, you got a reply. It's cold. Rain is the norm. Yeah, for sure. You just got back from London. Nice. So you made it back from London without. I guess you must have made it before all the travel bans and stuff. SG Mechanics, you're saying it's one of the best tutorials you've seen. Thank you so much, man. That really means a lot. It's these are long-winded, so these go for a couple hours, and I try to be as formulaic as I possibly can. So I appreciate that. That means a lot. And in the future, my plan is I'll be streaming at Pixelogic. Us developers have a lot of other jobs that we need to do, but in particular, Paul, Joseph, and myself are going to be streaming more. I'm going to be going twice a month, and all I want to do from here on out is project-based stuff. So this will be a part 1 through 4 series for this project. Next stream in a couple weeks, I'm going to go through and start something totally different. If you guys have ideas, you want to throw it out, I'm happy to consider anything possible. A couple people that have tuned into my streams have asked if I was going to go back to doing something called ZBrush mashups, where I was doing taking 2 themes, mixing them together to make it. So I picked Super Mario, and Blade Runner was the first one. So like a Luigi Blade Runner, I was going through making the gun, making the character. The plan was to do a Super Mario as Harrison Ford's character, have sort of like a scene between the two. Anyways, that might be something I'll consider in the future. But yeah, you're saying the flights got canceled, but you were able to fly out in a different airport on Tuesday. Man, well, luckily you were able to get out. That would be a nightmare to be trapped in London or not be able to travel. I don't even know if that's something that's happening, but I would imagine it is. But stay safe out there, you guys, and we're keeping our distance from each other, trying not to pass this stuff off to anyone else. Most of us are all probably healthy and fine, and it's going to be okay, but, like even I myself have asthma, but I'm not necessarily that worried about it too much. I'm healthy enough, I guess. Drinking my tea on a regular basis. Alright, so let's get started here. So, part 3, I left off with... We were talking a lot about keys. I was getting into doing some slicing in keys, but trying to figure out right now what we need to do is we're starting to... We got this stuff in ZBrush, but as of right now in the first 3 streams, we haven't really defined any output, any scale output, or the dimensions and what it's going to be printed on. So in this case, I'm using, in the office, we have an old MakerBot Replicator 2, which... That is, if you guys aren't familiar, that's MakerBots. They've just made some transitions, and those printers aren't made anymore. But we've had it forever, and it's a really awesome machine. It's still going. We've had it for 6-7 years now, and it's still rocking. So I'm able to get out like this piece here, just as a test build, just to kind of get it with just basic PLA. And it works great. Now the problem is that the print bed itself, the dimensions for that thing are pretty small. It's about yay big. So I'll talk about what the actual dimensions are here in a second. But that basically means trying to get this helmet into that space is going to require breaking up the parts. So then, oh, what's up, Stefano? How you doing, man? Best part of the day from quarantine. I'm glad that could be me. Oh, you have a CR10. Yeah, okay. I don't know if you were offering that before. If you want to shoot me your email in the chat, I'll communicate with you. I mean, I'm talking with the people. We have a good relationship with the people. Ultimaker. I have a lot of friends that have Formlabs printers. I'm trying to keep this cost effective and get it down. To me, PLA is easy enough. I can do a lot of this stuff by hand. I can prime it, sand it, paint it. I'll be fine. It's nice and lightweight, all that jazz, and it'll be cheap. But I love form printers too. I love the SLA printers and the resin quality. In this case, FDM is just what I have available. And on that note, well, we'll talk about this here in a second, but first thing I want to do is I want to go through the process with you guys on how I go about breaking up this stuff to make it easier for me to understand what space I'm working in and how I can break this stuff up and how I can keep this to scale and actually match this to my head. So we're going to go in, and actually if you guys want to check this out inside of that ZVC link here at the bottom, I posted just a quick video here of kind of some of the stuff that I'm going into today. So number one, we can consider the concept of 3D scanning. 3D scanning is awesome because I can bring a scan of myself in and just check to see if this thing fits within my space. The one thing that we don't get out of that scan is any sort of physical scale or dimensions, right? This thing just comes in a different size, and we need to figure out dimensions basically. And in ZBrush we can operate within X, Y, and Z space. So we can basically create bounding box dimensions in inches, millimeters, whatever it is that you need. So the scan's an option that we're going to talk about today. I'm actually going to talk about using just some cheap, this is all DIY stuff, easy things that I can do for pretty cheap. Just using a caliper tool to actually measure parts of my head, figure out how much space I have to work with. So we'll get to that here in a second, and then actually exporting out these files for print. So to get started here, I left off with we had the Dynamesh shell, so basically using live booleans here, if I turn live boolean preview on, to make the shell. What I get from here is, if I basically, what I can do is I can turn on, I basically have a little cube here as a subtractive piece, which is giving me an extra little benefit here with this shell. So I made the shell. This is the final live boolean UMesh piece. But the preview setup we have here from the last couple streams, with the addition of a cube that just sits here at the center point, this one gives me the option to just check the thickness of those borders. So the thickness here is going to be helpful when we break these up into parts to put keys so we can plug this stuff in together. So I made a couple of quick, we'll talk about these in the last couple of streams, just making like a simple key basically so we can snap this stuff together. Now this one is a failure. I was trying to figure out the right distance between the male and female, the additive and subtractive pieces. So what we don't want is stuff to like twist. We want to be able to plug it in, it stays in pretty good, we can glue it together, all that jazz. So this one's a little, the distance, the scale between the two pieces is a little too much. So I'm going to talk about actually a plugin we can use to play around with those keys as well. But essentially we just want to have this as a way to come back to if we want to check, you know, the thickness, if we need to add more thickness. The great thing about live booleans is I have a duplicate from the last stream that I can literally just go in here with even just a big move brush, and I can start playing around with how much I want this to recede back to give me a thicker base when I start slicing this stuff up. All right, so I can use this for all kinds of things if I need it. But for now, I think I've done a pretty good job of setting this one up, and then we'll start now from the UMesh. So I did some test slices and breaking up of parts before, but I'm going to do this for real with you guys from start to finish. So essentially I've got the other pieces here. These, I'm not going to be able to go through the breaking up of the stuff for these pieces, but everything that I go through with the helmet applies to these parts to print this out in whatever print bed you have available to you. So we're going to just focus on the helmet, which will take enough time as it is. So then we've got this UMesh piece. Now one thing that I like to do from the UMesh is once you get this piece, if you take a look at the booleans, this is where I might want to do any kind of like cleanup to the model itself. See, I did all the promo stuff. So yeah, don't forget, just for everybody that's here now, Joseph Dress, March 26th, and ZBrush Core, we have some new pricing options and things like that. If you guys are interested or don't know ZBrush, or don't have ZBrush, it's a great place to start. You can check out the link here, and that'll be here in the stream. But I'm going to turn this off now, just so you guys can see everything I've got in my UI down here if I touch it. So then, the live boolean piece that we get, right, you get all these crazy triangles, and that's great if you're not going to touch the model. But if you go in and you hold shift, or let's say I need to turn off my spotlight projection here, right, like the smoothing out any of this stuff when you have these crazy triangles is pretty much no bueno. So if you want to do any kind of like cleanup, in particular what I'm kind of looking at here is from the live boolean I get, it's like if you go back to the setup here, just frame this guy, turn this off. I'll select the visor, so I did a little cutout piece just to cut through, but that's leaving a little bit of artifacts, and basically it's not like perfectly flush along there. I could try and modify the boolean piece, but in my opinion it's a little bit easier to just use some basic sculpting tools like the smooth brush. So we can take this UMesh piece, we can go to Geo, I'm just going to crank up this Dynamesh up high, and then click Dynamesh to go through and run it. Winston, you were asking how long is it taking to print these parts. So this one in particular was something like, it was like 8 to 10 hours. And this one, it was just a quick test, as it wasn't actually isn't to scale. So this will be a little bit smaller, probably more like 8 parts for the bigger ones. I was going through, trying a couple other slice builds, like I got a piece here. This one's maybe 6 hours, 7 hours, and this is at low quality settings. So really, we'll talk about settings. I'm going to use Simplify 3D to configure the slicing and all that, and the supports. But it really comes down to time. So I might increase those things later down the road when I want to get a final product. But the low quality stuff, I mean, this one was pretty low. And you get some really nice like grooves, cut lines, the keys come in really good. If this looks good to me, I'm going to paint it and sand it anyways. And in this particular build, the helmet's kind of like scratched up and stuff, so like any little like imperfections I think will be fine for something like this and shouldn't make much of a difference. Hola Jose, welcome. So we got this thing, I just Dynamished it high res, no projection. And the no projection gave me a pretty good result for all those little details. That should be fine. So now here's where I can kind of go in here and I could hold the shift key and basically start to like just kind of smooth out these little lines here if I don't want this stuff. Mainly, like I was noticing, there's some little artifacts here from the boolean. And you can use masking to kind of go through and protect this stuff. Whatever you need to do to kind of go through and modify these things and make these little quick adjustments, right? So I won't spend too much time on this. This is just something I want to mention in terms of the process here. This is where, before you go do any slicing, if you can fix anything, any weird artifacts, you can do all this stuff here. And Dynamesh is a pretty good tool to just like remesh it, give you a clean surface to blend with. Audio quality is superb. Yes. Oh, I feel like that calls for a. This is a Bill Murray. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so sad. I'm so sad, and happy at the same time. I've been working so hard to get this stupid audio to function. It was like the Cintiq had a microphone in it, the one stream. I've got like, I don't know, you can't see it, but maybe if I turn it over, I got it like another like microphone here. There's just all these different audio sources in this office that who knows what's on. If you were spying on me, you'd probably get all the information you could ever need. Yeah, come in. No lunch for me today, but thank you. Pixelogic has been very awesome to us, and they've been buying us lunches, keeping us from going outside, so that's pretty great. Okay, so anyways, this is something you can do. Right, now from here, I want to talk about the slicing. I want to get straight to it because this might take a little bit of time. So what I want to know is I want to figure out how many parts am I going to have to break up, and in order for me to do this, I got to choose or get the print bed dimensions. So if you go to, like I just Googled MakerBot Replicator 2, I think it was page, let's go page 7, not 2. Or not. Could have sworn there was more pages in here. There we go. Yeah, okay. So the build volume here, I'm going to do all this stuff in inches. We'll talk about conversion from millimeters to inches, which is easy to do with the plugin we're going to use. But the build volume I have is 11.2 length, 6 in width, and 6.1 in height, all in inches. So what I like to do here in this case is give myself some space to actually have a physical thing in here that shows me how much space I have to work with, and I can quickly kind of concept out how I'm going to try and break up these parts. So to do this, this is going to be like, I'm going to use this scene that I'm going to set up here for all my scale and everything we do from here on out. So go into Z plugin, we're going to use Scale Master, and in order to use Scale Master, we have to follow an order of operations. So first what we want to do is we want to set the scene scale and set the units of measurement that we want to work in. So you get a bunch of options. We get millimeters, and millimeters and inches on the top is what we want. We don't want centimeters or feet. And you'll see in inches, we get basically two different breakdowns. So this is just the units of increments that you want to work in this case, 11 by 6 by 6-ish. I'm going to start with this one. So just clicking, this is basically just assigning these default values here, but it's going to reset the ZBrush sort of space and the units in inches. So it's going to do a conversion in the background. So clicking this one, we're now going to be in inches. Now, before I do anything else, to really kind of get an idea for how big this object is, I'm going to actually make the build plate itself to then go in and rescale the object. So going back into Scale Master, now that we're in inches, you'll see that the values that we selected are going to be assigned here to the sliders. Now, first what I'm going to do is just make a box or an object that is the print bed itself. So one thing you could do is you could click this little 1 unit helper. So within the space that we're in inches, if I click this, this is going to make a 1 by 1 by 1 cube. So a 1 by 1 by 1 cube means that this thing is about, I don't know, 3 inches wide by, you know, roughly, you know, if you were to go in and like duplicate this thing, roughly 4 inches tall, something like that. So we're going to need to visualize this a little bit better here. So then going into this cube, so I'm just using this option to just bring in a cube. So we say they love the Z cone. Oh yeah, the that's probably one of the Pixelogic guys. It's actually a ZBrush hoodie, but the arms are kind of folded in. I hung that baby up, showing off a little bit. The so this cube here, what I want to do is I want to make this the dimensions of that print bed. So again, 11.2 in length, which I'm going to do in X space. 6 in width, I'm going to do in Z space, and then 6.1 in height, I'm going to do in Y space. So we got this cube here, and we want to rescale it to get the proper dimensions. So with the sliders here, when you basically what we need to do is we need to set the values for those X, Y, and Z dimensions, and then we need to click the resize subtool button to apply it. Now, if you change one slider, you'll see that the others update, and this is because of the lock sliders to ratio option, and this option is turned on by default. So because we want to set customized X, Y, and Z dimensions, what I'm going to do is turn that off. So in X, we're going to say it was 11, and if you see me looking to the left, I wrote some of these values down. I have a little bulletin board over there. 11.2 in X. Y is going to be 6.1, and then Z is going to be 6. Yes, 6. And then before I click this resize subtool button, you'll see to the right we have an all option. Now what this will do is this will scale the object itself to match these dimensions, and these dimensions themselves are more like a 16 by 9 aspect ratio. They're stretched wide, which means the object is going to stretch too. So we don't want to do it to the helmet. We're going to manually scale that. So we're going to turn all option off. I'm going to click resize subtool. So that's going to go through and update and make this cube the perfect dimensions, the build space for the MakerBot Replicator 2. So what I like to do here is I'm going to turn on double side, which is the tool palette, going down to display properties, turn double side on, and then I can go to Z Modeler. I'm going to go to polygon, delete a single, and I'm just going to, whoops, no symmetry, cut out this space. Alright, so now I got, this is the build volume, and I can see inside that space. So right now if I were to go print this helmet, it's going to be itty bitty, it'll be pretty small, about this big. So then what I like to do here with this piece is, now that I have, this is just a rough out for the helmet, let's just call this like, I'm going to rename this Michelle OG, and I'm going to duplicate it, so I'll save that as a backup here. This one we're going to go slice concept 1, just whatever, give it a, this is just to kind of visualize how I'm actually going to break up these parts. So if, what I kind of did is I sketched this out, I looked at, let me pull this up here real quick. I just took a snapshot of the model from the side view, and I was looking at all the parts here that I know what we want to be concerned with here, at least in my experiences. When you're going to be reconnecting these parts, you don't want it to be happening at parts that that would be an eyesore. So I want to do it at spaces that have less detail, just where I can get clean, solid slices and breakup. So I did a slice cut here. Just a quick idea, like, okay, I know this isn't touching anything, this isn't touching any of this stuff. These are clean cuts that I can basically reassemble. And so whatever you see here is going to be done on the other side as well, potentially. So to kind of put this into action here, I did that quick little concept. And now, let's see, I'm going to turn off symmetry. And here's where I'm just going to use selection rectangle, the selection brushes, to just show and hide parts of the model. I don't care about these things being, like you'll see they're a little jagged. This is just to kind of check and actually put these in the space to make sure they're going to fit inside that print bed. So what I was thinking was, I'm going to start by cutting this thing in half. So here I'm just going to go, and actually to do this right, I don't need to do it twice. I'll just delete the other half. So we'll just work on one side here. And so a clean slice will be, these are going to basically attach at the middle and then maybe break up into other parts. So kind of looking at those slices, that's an easy way to break this stuff up. Also, what I like about this is that the front part is disconnected. So like you know, if I hold this thing up to my face, like it's going to connect roughly here, but this piece is going to be separated where I'm going to put some kind of, you know, plastic or vinyl or something that has that black sort of visor look. But I like this as a starting point, and then taking a look at those other slices, let's go and do, I'm going to Control Shift drag over a chunk like this. I'm going to go to Subtool, I'm going to do Split Hidden. So I broke that off. Now let's go take a look at this. I'm going to do a selection. Really, I'm just going all the way up. You'll see I got a little space right here where it's not touching any of those little pieces. It's a nice clean cut that can easily just have one piece to connect to. And we'll do Split Hidden. And then go to the next group. Oh, whoops, actually, looks like I missed a little bit. Gotta go all the way down. Split Hidden there. And then let's go grab this about there. Okay, so then what I'll do is I'll start with, I'm going to turn all these off. And let's just take a look at the... Oh, and actually, you know what? One thing I forgot about this before we go through and do these slices. Oops. I don't have any actual real dimensions. Before I can even do that, kind of jumping ahead here, is what I want to do is I want to get the helmet to be the accurate scale of what I want to print this thing out to be. So I got to do a whole bunch of stuff before I get into this. Pro 4210, what's up, man? I think you were watching in the last stream. If you were, welcome back. Great to have you. So yeah, I got way ahead of myself there. What I really need to do is I want to get that scan data in here, and I also want to start talking about these dimensions. So real quick, what I did is I went to get the scan. First I started with just the scan of my head. I feel like that's an easy way to just kind of visualize the helmet itself. So if I go in here and let's do, I'm going to click this link here. There's a free app called display.land if you're on iOS. If you just Google, or rather look in the App Store for 3D scanners, I think this is the first one that pops up. So display.land. And here I was able to, just here on our conference room, it's a really low quality scan. You know, free stuff isn't always the best, but it gives me a physical object. So basically it's like you're just going around, it's capturing points. Had to have my coworker Paul go through, what's up Chris? For a good 10, 15 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe 5 minutes, until it captured enough. Yeah, you're playing with it. Okay, great. I find, in my experience, it got the job done, it turns out. I honestly didn't trust that it was going to be great, but I ended up getting something pretty decent. So this is what the scan kind of looked like all the way around, but you get me here inside there. So here you can, in the app, you can get an OBJ file. So if you do the scan, it works, you'll find a way to download an OBJ, which is what I did. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to load a tool. Let's go, I think in here I have 3D scan. Or actually I think it was an OBJ, so let's go, I'm going to select a polystar, go to import. Let's grab the helmet, I think I put it in here. Yeah, original scan. So it's going to be a little wacky here. We'll turn on double. So OBJ, a lot of these programs are going to give you an OBJ. If for whatever reason it's an STL, now in ZBrush you'll be able to import those formats. You get STLs here, which is a new thing in ZBrush as of lately. So if you haven't been caught up on all this stuff before, you had to go to, and if you use this kind of stuff before, you had to go to 3D Print Hub to import STL files. You could do it here now from the tool palette. So you can bring those in like so. So what I get is all this garbage from that conference room, and I got a decent enough like volumetric sort of shape of me, right? Which will work, and then I'll actually get into using this stuff to get more accurate X, Y, and Z bounding box dimensions to match this stuff up. But first, let's get me in there. So what I found was this came in, it separated me from the extra space around it. So if I go to polygroups and do auto group, I could just isolate out me, select it. I'm going to go to my custom menu to delete hidden, which is geometry modify topo. Alright, so now I get this. And let's go in here and I'm going to turn on the floor grid. Let's turn on gizmo, recenter, send me to home space, and let's maybe do a little rotation to get me a little bit more straightforward. Now what I'm going to do is I'll probably scale this up a little bit, only because I know if the object is smaller, This is one little thing with Dynamesh. If you don't know, Dynamesh, the resolution is going to react differently depending on the physical scale in ZBrush. So if I do it 128 here and I click it, you'll see at this scale you get 52 points. However, if I go in and I scale this baby up and I keep it at 128 and I Dynamesh, you'll see it's now 7,000. So it changes. So you can usually start off by just going to Deformation, clicking Unify. Unify is going to put it at Unified World Space and do it at 128. That's about 15K. I'm going to take this up to maybe 300. Enough to like keep me... What I like to do is like I want to clean up some of this crazy triangles. I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's just like a personal thing. But if I Dynamesh it, if you do it too low, like say we do it at 128, you get 79,000. If I hold Shift and I smooth, it destroys a lot of the details. So if you were to Dynamesh this thing into like the millions, something pretty high, a couple million, that's going to make it super dense. So now when I try and smooth, I'm going to destroy less, but smoothing out with the Shift key is a pain. So if you turn on Gizmo, we can go to Customize, we can click Smooth All. So here I can basically go in and I can pull the smooth cone, and I can slightly modify this. So I'm not worried too much about destroying some of these lines because I know that the scan isn't very accurate. If I was using like a really nice laser scanner or like a high-end, scanner where I can get photogrammetry and use all of that, that might, whoops, maybe I went a little too much. Let's go just here. At these high reses, it takes a little bit of time to process. So let's go here, click Accept. So if it was a better scan, I'd take more care into not destroying, especially the silhouette here. Oh yeah, Pro, you were saying you're running into an issue trying to clean up for the mesh. Divided, audio view projects. Yeah, so you're getting photo textures too. This scan, yeah, I got the photos, but I didn't really care about the color. In this case, I just want the model. But yeah, it's a little messy, but you get something. It's not too bad. So now I'm going to go through. I don't need everything below. I'm just going to go up here to about the shoulders. Reverse that, and let's do delete hidden. And then if I re-Dynamesh, Dynamesh is going to close the holes. And now I've got this piece. Now my hair is going to be problematic. That'll shrink down, so I'm going to probably need to like go through and smooth this out a bit. So let's go in here, and what I found was at least using, so this is a caliper tool. You can find this on Amazon. I just looked up calipers. It took me a while to find it down the list, but just an easy scalable tool that I can figure out dimensions. And then what I get out of this is I can just put that, mark these points here on a piece of paper. Use just a basic ruler to line those things up, and then you can get inch measurements between width. So I was able to find that at the very least, like the furthest points out for me are my ears. Which is pretty much going to be the case for everyone, for the most part. So really everything that cuts in here, all this hair space, is basically just need to sit within. Now I just figure I want to have enough space to put this thing on and have a little wiggle room inside. If I have a little extra wiggle room, I can put in like foam padding or things like that on the insides to kind of fill in the gaps. So I want to make sure I have enough space to just put this thing straight on and no issues. So my ears being the furthest point out, I don't want to have to like scrunch my ears up and like fold them back to get it through. I want to just be able to put it on. So I'm going to use this, basically this little space between ear space here is my width marker. So going in with basic cleanup tools, we can maybe go in and do just a simple little mask off of the hair. I'm going to do a little, just slight blur. Now, if I reverse this, another thing I love about this Gizmo Smooth, this to me is the best smooth in ZBrush in terms of procedural smooth. This Smooth All. This one, I can use this cone control and I can really go in and I can push this thing. It has a cap, so if you complete the smooth at 500, it's done. If you go in and click accept, you can repeat and go do it again. Now, before I do that though, if I were to reduce resolution here just slightly, I could probably speed this process up. So remesh it down to maybe 3,000 or so, or 300,000. Let's just reselect real fast. Should have done that before. And I might just do a little soft blur. So then let's click this, go back and do smooth all, run this thing, max it out, and I might have to repeat a couple times. you're saying pre-drag, just out of curiosity, would you be getting the same smoothing result on the body scan by using the polish slider? No. So the polish slider has a different result at edges. So when you run this polish, that's a good question. What you tend to get with, like, let's just say we go, I'm going to try it on a different mesh here. Let's do make poly mesh. Dynamesh this thing. Maybe not that high. Let's do it here. 98,000. So let's just say I take this inverse. Let's do a deformation. And just do a little inflate, right? And then we'll remesh it. All right. Now, one thing polish does is especially where you meet edges, like edges here, and you run this thing, what you'll get is at those borders, if you notice at the signs, the algorithm is different. It's a great polishing tool, right? And if you keep running it, it'll start to smooth. But what you get is the curvature areas like this, they balloon out. So if that doesn't work for you, to me, if you hold the shift key and you go across, the shift has a little bit of shrinkage, right? So it's basically moving the mesh towards its own axis, or the world space of itself, and it's shrinking it down. This is what the smooth is doing from Gizmo, but it's doing it globally. So that's different from polish. So you'll see if I do, let's just say we do polish, right? You get like snapshot that one. So you see that result here on the left. Undo it here, and if I turn on Gizmo, let's click this, and if you click smooth all, it does something like it does a certain value. It does 37 out of 500. So it does a little bit of smooth, but you'll see the difference between it is it's rounding out evenly. So it has more even distribution across those vertex points. So just two different algorithms in the ways that it smooths, but each one has its benefits. Really depends on the case. But yeah, great question. So going back to this piece, let's do one more time, or a couple more times. It's so funny. I look like I have like a half fro. Like how to find out if certain hairstyles look good on you or not. Now, I might just go in here and just like brute force some of this stuff. Now, anything that, in terms of, like, you'll see I'm moving the object and I'm changing the shape of my head. Now, I'll be able to use the caliper, I can use the calipers basically to adjust the heights and the widths and stuff like that if I need to, which we'll get to here in a second. So let's go down even lower. And if you need to do a quick smoothing, you can go to Lightbox, Brush, Smooth Folder, and we can run the Smooth Stronger brush, which this one will basically go through and kind of bring the stuff down a lot faster than the regular smooth brush at 100 intensity. So just making sure that I'm not destroying the ears in any way, and I'll continue to basically like model this out. Yeah, it'd be way easier if I just shaved my head. Just got to deal with that for a while. What I'm planning on doing is, like, this has been a fun project to play around with, but we have a few connections, and I'm reaching out to people to see if, you know what, I think I'm just going to go pay, especially in today's economy. I feel like I'd be doing my civic duty to go pay for a scan, get a nice good one myself. Like I don't know if you guys watch Adam Savage, his tested show on YouTube. I watch it all the time, and he's got this really awesome scan, like full body scan of himself. And what people usually say is the best way to do it is you do a cast of yourself. You could put like a skull wrap on or something, get a cast of yourself with all the details on it, and you do a scan of that, and then you bring that into ZBrush or whatever, and then you'll have that forever. Like he has a mannequin of himself that he uses for all of his stuff to match to him, you know, the body armor and whatever it is that he's working on. But I love that. I think that's like, you know, especially for us in today's day and age, I feel like that's a cool thing to just have at your disposal if you need it. So anyways, like just cleaning up a little bit of the scan. I think I'm just going to leave it as is. What's up, Mike? Oh yeah, so Shane's one of your best friends, dude. Shane is awesome. You guys have, I mean, if you're good friends with Shane, you must be an awesome dude, because that guy's amazing. I love everything he does. How do you know him? Did you guys work together or? Got it. What's up, Racer? Yeah, the that interview was a blast. Honestly, I love to hear those. I mean, those stories like from the days when like just going from like studio to studio and like the little things that like you kind of forget about. Just listening to a person talk about that experience to me is so. I'm always interested in it. No matter what industry it is, like I just love it, and I love to see the enthusiasm and just like watch a person be able to kind of go through that sort of like backlog of all the stuff you used to do. What's up, Ivan? You worked at Sapphire and Avalanche. Got it. Okay. So, are you still? Where are you working at now? You working in the same industry? Like, it's funny that his stories were interesting because he was basically going from like so many different positions, like doing some animation, doing some graphics, doing some modeling. Just like those days, you just kind of do everything. Like, I guess that's when like being a generalist was better. You worked in concept. Okay, you work in concept currently, dude. That's awesome. I'm jealous. Um, yeah, a friend of mine was just texting me today and or yesterday rather, and was saying, let's see, what did he say? Oh, the I guess it's Doug Chang, the original creator or creator of this design. I was like, I made this really crappy concept sketch of this piece that I'm doing to show you guys how to do the stuff in ZBrush, and it was like they were just like laughing. I was like, yeah, I can't be. There's no way that I could be a concept artist and like work in 2D. I've hung up my 2D skills long ago, so I have so much appreciation for people like you that do concept work and like work in that medium, because to me it's masterful. Like, I'm just a builder at this point. I like to make stuff and sculpt. Sculpture kind of became my new love once I got introduced to that from drawing. Like back in the day, I was in high school, and I'm gonna go ahead and bring this thing into my that scene we have with the plate. I was in high school learning how to do comic book art. It was like an intercollegiate program, and I was in it for like 2 weeks, and I saw some dude using ZBrush and Maya, and I was just like peeking over his head for a couple days, and eventually I was just like, yeah, I'm just gonna go do that, and I really never picked up drawing again. I mean, I still do it from now and then, but it's not really it's not something I practice a lot, which is, I know, shame, but it's nice to be able to do quick sketches, and I wish I spent more time on it, honestly, but I just like building. It takes away from time for me to build. So you'll see I'm just kind of starting to go through. I'm going to match myself up in here. Get this space working. Alright, so I assume that at this point, we'll figure out the dimensions here in a second. Yeah, you're saying same. Okay, so I'm just kind of going through. I'm going to readjust this stuff. So I'm going to get a bounding box here in a second. This, for now, at least I get my line of sight. I can see, like, okay, I know roughly my eyes are going to be able to see through this. This would be like if you're working like, for example, on the Mandalorian, you have to make something like this. From what I see, you only have so much distance from your eyes to the top of your head. The top of your head is the piece, the part of your body that's holding this thing down. So that distance between eye line is custom. So it's really something like, this isn't necessarily going to be a universal helmet that anybody can put on. Is going to have the exact same line of sight. Like, you might vary. I mean, generally speaking, we all kind of have an average amount of distance between that space, but you might find that it doesn't exactly match. So this is where, like, in terms of like a design, you might have to like play around with this stuff. For me, this is nice to be able to see, like, okay, I know that if my head's sitting roughly in that space, I'm not protruding through. That thickness is about, we'll talk about the scale of that thickness, not even maybe a 0.5 millimeters, maybe something in that range. But we got this thing roughly in place. Now, there's no scale set yet. The build plate itself is currently set to scale. So both of these things would be super small if I printed these guys out. They'd be, whatever the height is, that's not even 6 inches tall. So it'd be about 5 inches. So then what I want to do now is this is where the caliper tools came in handy. So for me, again, going back to that video, if you go to ZBC, this video here, so again, if you guys are just checking it in on ZBrush Central, just my name is Solomon_Blair. I made a post, you can check it out. There's just me going through talking about just getting the stuff on paper. So I just put down a bunch of paper. Oh geez, where is it? Yeah, here towards the end. And I just got those dimensions. So that furthest point out, I got to my ears. I went through and scaled this thing up, and I got basically, because we're not gonna do individual like we did with the build plate. We do custom levels for X, Y, and Z space because we want to readjust the aspect ratio. But for me, really, if I have just one unit of dimension here, so basically just the width, everything else is going to scale uniformly with the object. So really just having that width, which I found from ear to ear was about 7.25 of an inch. So we'll just say 7 for this demonstration here. So I got these values, like I've got a bulletin board over here, which I just wrote down the X, Y, and Z width. So I got X width 7, height was about 8.37. I was only able to get the caliper tool only went so wide to go from chin up to about forehead or top of the head here. Didn't get quite the full height. I would need another tool for that. But I was able to get depth too. So basically going from nose to back of the head, which was, you know, this is my little cheat sheet, 8.5-ish. So I went through and I put those on a piece of paper, used the ruler, drew a line, got those inches, and now I have those dimensions. So with those values, I know that that width is going to be 7. So in this scene here, if I go to Z plugin, I'm going to make a new bounding box here. So if we go to just the helmet here, here's a cool little trick. We can turn off all the subtools, and we can go to Z plugin, and inside of Scale Master, we can do a new bounding box subtool. So it's going to make a bounding box that's currently preset to whatever subtools are visible, in this case the helmet. So it's just giving you that exact dimension. So this cube here, if you go to Scale Master and we do sliders to subtool size, I'm going to turn this ratio back on here. So this is telling us right now that the current helmet is 3.4 inches wide, 4.4 inches tall, and 3.8 inches in depth, or Z space. Now all I want to do is I want to bring this bounding box to the furthest points out of my width, so 7. So that was using the caliper tool to get that value. So if I just go to X and I put this at 7 and I click enter, Y and Z are going to update with that uniform ratio with this thing turned on. So it's locking that ratio. And then I want to resize the subtool. And now in this case, if you resize, let's say I want to change this bounding box to those dimensions, and I want to scale the helmet up to match those same values. So this is where having the resize all option, so this is looking at resize all subtools based on the resizing the selector ratio. Now I actually can't remember if this does all subtools. Let's see what it does. If I do, no, actually what I'm going to do is, just to be safe, because I don't want to undo this, maybe it's a little easier to go into do one at a time. So I'm going to turn it all off. I'm going to click resize subtool and resize the bounding box. Alright, so that's gone through and it's changed it. So you'll see now with that print bed in there, the helmet is going to be a lot bigger than that build space is. So then I want to update the helmet to match that bounding box. So I can select that subtool. Actually what we can do is go to this new scaled bounding box. We could update those sliders to subtool. And then if we go click the helmet here, let's go back to Z plugin, and then we can do resize subtool to match those values. It's going to go through and basically readjust that thing and match it exactly to what we just did to that first bounding box. So now, turning off that bounding box, what I've got here is hold on, I'll get to questions here in a second. Is the correct size of this, and now I'm going to go in. I'm just going to use my head to now bring up. You can basically, we could apply those things, but essentially now what I want to do is kind of use this as a safe check here. So I'm going to kind of go through, make sure. Now I do actually want to get that bounding box at least for the width, and in order for this bounding box to work for my head to match inside of that space, essentially what I want to do here is I want to get the proper width to assign from the 7 across all the way from basically here to here, from ear to ear. Now the width is going to be checking here, the shoulder, my shoulders that are tapering down, those would be included. So if I go to Z plugin and I do new bounding box subtool, Oh, whoops. Actually, let's delete. That does all visible, so we'll turn off everything. Just me. When you scale it up, it's going to make, basically it's going to be accounting for those shoulder pieces. So instead of doing it that way, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go in, and I don't need, basically the ears go further down from my neck. So if I go in and grab just a selection brush here, let's go chop off that part. I'm going to do delete hidden, remesh. Now what I should get, if I, just to kind of visualize the bounding borders here, is if we do a, turn off that print bed one more time, do a new bounding box subtool, what you get is that width is going to match from ear to ear, which is all I need. If I scale this thing up at 7, it should match to the helmet space that it's currently in. So going to that helmet here, or going to my head rather, if I go to, let's go to this, I want to get those values which are actually still there. Those don't change unless you redo or re-click sliders to subtool size or you make any changes. So if those values are still there, I can go to this the scan of myself, and I can go to Z plugin, and I'm going to make sure all is off, and I'm going to resize. We can turn the helmet on so we can see it. So resize that subtool. So now the head itself, oops, that's a little off. So instead, sometimes if you see these things break, let's undo it. Let's go through and do, it's a little bit easier if we take this guy and we do sliders to subtool size. We'll readjust it, and then we can just simply go to X here manually. We'll do 7, press enter, resize subtool, and that should do it uniformly. There we go. So then what I get is my head is now the proper dimension. You'll see that the helmet actually needs to fit over my head. So now what I get is my head is properly sort of set up here, and I actually need to go just manually scale up this helmet in this space to make sure that I fit. And what I care about most now, what I love about the scan, is I can kind of check like, okay, how much space do I actually have in here? Like, are my ears protruding? Looks like here my ears are actually kind of like folding in and touching the inside of that shell. And I'm also getting some space here, which is really just a matter of figuring out, okay, so this is definitely going to be a little larger. And I'm just going to set it up so the ears aren't touching that space. There we go. And then let's make sure it's not touching any of this inside stuff too. So maybe you could do stuff like this, like you can kind of go in and just like cut this in half. Turn on double side so we can see. So that I can fix, I can correct by just sliding it forward. Looks like the cheek and ear, that stuff is clear. My ear will fold back just a tiny bit. So that's pretty good. Let's just go in now, take this thing and slide it back and check one more time. There we go. So then, yeah, this is a little close. It's a little tight. Touching there on the cheek. So maybe let's just, you know, maybe you could play around with like getting this thing just slightly bigger, stuff like that. All right, so now got a little bit of space in there. Any of those extra little gaps and things, this is where I'm probably going to, you know, maybe add some foam or stuff like that that I'll put in on the final thing. So then once I got this thing in space, now we actually get a clear understanding of what's going on with these parts and pieces. So now, as I started earlier with the slicing up and breaking up to fit in the print bed, what I'll get is essentially a more accurate scale representation of the final helmet. Now the scan I don't really need, and now what I want to do is, we got this UMesh shell, we'll call this scale safe, and I'm going to make a copy of this one, and we'll call this, I'm going to break this up into parts, so part 1. So what I'll get is just to concept out one more time. I'm going to cut this thing in half. Do a quick delete hidden. So I'm going to start with a slice down the middle. Going back to those slices, I'll probably do this piece. Go to split hidden. Now go here. To split hidden. And then we've got this piece as well. Okay, so then now what I want to do is let's turn off all these parts. Now I'm going to go to this helmet piece. Now I'm going to use Gizmo just to, this is just visual check. So I want to see if this piece is going to fit and print in that bed. All right, so that one being a fairly large part, that one's working okay for me. And this is where, like, in ZBrush I kind of like to be able to go through and I can check, like, if I'm going to do, we'll talk about if you haven't done any printing, but supports is always a problem, how much space you have. Being able to re-angle things and readjust so that supports don't build in parts that, you know, you don't want them to hit, or you want to, like, because there's a lot of cleanup. I'm using Simplify 3D for the most part. Does a pretty fantastic job. It doesn't have a lot of like remnants of supports. The old MakerBot desktop software was a lot more challenging. There's a lot of just surface bumps and things that you have to like rip it off and the plastic would be stuck. Simplify 3D does a pretty amazing job. But in my opinion, just being able to have the ability to kind of make sure that you have room to rotate and play around with this space here is helpful. So then going into the next part, this one might be a little challenging. Let's see if we can make this work. So I can fit it in roughly like so. Yep, that'll work just fine. So I could do the supports going to the inside. I always try and keep supports on the inside of the objects, the good surfaces. I want to keep it off, at least for an FDM printer like this. Yeah, so this printer is going to be, this is for me to do prototypes because we have it in the office, the MakerBot Replicator 2, which is a very old, but, I mean, old relatively, but it is such a great printer. We've had it in the office for so long, and we use it for this kind of stuff all the time just to get a prototype out. And I'll probably want to do a final good one on like a more expensive machine or some more expensive material. So Mechanic was offering to print, which I really appreciate, and yeah, I appreciate it. I've had a lot of friends that have offered to do it too. On FDM printers or maybe using forms, I'll have to do a final build once I get all these parts done. So all these pieces fit, and this is one half. I can just do it once and then duplicate these over just to get the clean slices. Then we got to figure out how to do the keys. So to me, the keys just help to get away from having this the ability to like turn. You want to be able to like lock these things in together and glue it and make it nice and flush without any gap. Yeah, the MakerBot printers are so good. The one thing that I find that's an improvement is introducing Simplify 3D software has been a great improvement for me in the process, which I'll go through with you guys towards the end here, setting up those files for print. So this is my concept. Those slices are going to work. This is how I kind of go through it. This is just checking if I can make this stuff work within the space I have. Now, one thing I want to call out here is if you go to YouTube, the part 2 of this series, somebody had a really good comment. Stuart Sayer was commenting about a week ago. He was saying, I really like the 2 streams, looking forward to the installments. One issue I see is the way you have the split. I was going through talking about the split down the center. Split and adding keys is going to make it a difficult print. The void where the visor will need quite a bit of support, and male keys means the side of the helmet will both have a small build plate footprint and require supports along the rest of the joint edge, which he is right. Those were basically things that were happening in this process, which is going to increase the post-processing. And in this case, like, he's basically commenting that maybe doing a bigger print bed or trying to break up your slices in a different way is absolutely going to change the outcome of this project. Like, ideally, you just want to get it off the print bed. You want it to be perfect and don't have to do a lot of cleanup. You just want to go to paint it and all that stuff. I might have to do a little bit of manual work with this process. I'm okay with it because I'm just trying to do a prototype in this replicator, but I might end up going back and changing these slices, maybe not doing one down the middle. You know, if I could just do, most ideally what I would love is if I had a printer big enough to get all these parts without having to cut it in half. If I could just grab like a slice straight off the dome, I could just plop that thing on top, right? That'd be easy. And then if I could go in and do, you know, basically taking that piece, splitting that off, and then maybe just going in and doing like halves like this, right? If I could just cut this thing in half like so, I could do it in technically 3 pieces. Let's do no symmetry about here, right? If I could get this thing to work like so, if I could just literally take that thing and print it, man, that would be amazing. And other printers, other ways of building, like maybe a CNC would be easier. CNC is going to be a lot faster too. So it all comes down to like what tools you have available. But in this case, I'm just trying to show you guys. To me, this is the harder way to do it because we have a small space to work in. So if you can do it the hard way, you can totally do this in an easier system and an easier setup. So these slices for me are going to work well enough, and I'll deal with the post-processing. So then what I want to do is I'm going to delete these temp slices. And now what I want to do is actually go in and get clean slices, because the problem that I get from this is these are not going to, number one, when you do splits, if I take this thing and I do split hidden, solo this thing out with double side on, right? The thickness gap here, this isn't closed geometry. So this needs to be clean surfaces. We need to do clean cuts. And another problem when you do splitting is that it leaves these jagged edges and things that are going to maybe create artifacts and that kind of stuff. So one thing that you can't do with this, if you might consider, like if I go to Dynamesh and I just re-Dynamesh this piece, Dynamesh does close holes. But what you'll see is when you get two gaps here, most likely what we'll get is this piece, or absolutely, this outer border is going to close on top of this inner border. Well, this is, geez, why'd I do it so high? SG Mechanic, oh, I scaled it up too. Ooh. Yeah, I guess I'll wait. You were saying your background's in mechanical engineering. 3D printing still amazes you. I know. It does, honestly, me too. I have enough experience with it. I mean, for the last 10 years, I've been printing on and off, doing experiments and things, which is working. You see, this thing just completely failed. You can't use Dynamesh to close this stuff. But yeah, it's like the greatest reward to be able to get your stuff in the physical, especially for me working in digital for, going on 15 years. It's like having the thing in your hand is so amazing. It's better than any render, any animation, in my opinion. I think that's just because I'm a builder at heart. But yeah, you'll see close holes doesn't work, and you'll see that shell on the inside still exists. So long story short, you can't do that. So we're gonna delete this. So then what I want to do these slices, going back to this concept here, let's bring this up. I want these clean slices. I want perfect slices, nice flat edges to go and put my keys on. So instead of doing close holes and splitting, we're going to use live booleans to set this up. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'll leave this helmet here. That's the scale safe one. We still have the scan in there. I'm going to clone this helmet. One of the great things about, let's just reset. I'm going to reconfigure the tool up here so we just see this. If I go here and I click clone, the pre-scaled object here in this scene, if I go select the clone over here, is going to be exact same size. So you won't see it change at all. So anything I do here, I can bring back to my tool over here that's got the scene scaled, and everything is okay. So here, if I go back to this object, I'm going to use this to do my slicing. So first and foremost, I want the clean slice down the middle. So what I'm going to do is insert, and let's see, we had that as, let's see how many helmets we need. I'm not going to do this concept. I did a slice down here too. I'm just going to do one clean one on the top. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. 8, technically speaking, but 4 on 1/2. So I'm going to do this as part 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to make duplicates of this helmet. Turn these off. I'm going to go to the first one, and I'm going to insert a poly star. Mainly because I'm going to use the star to go to customize and grab a poly cube, which is now going to replace that star. So for the poly cube, what I'm going to do is set these sliders to 1, 1, and 1. So the benefit of this is going to have the slice point here right at the world center. So then let's just make sure that my helmet, I'm going to click reset, and then click home to make sure that that thing is perfectly symmetrical. So that line you should see, that doesn't change the scale, but that line should be right down the dead center of this object, as long as this object is symmetrical, which if you watch the first 3 streams, it's all symmetrical. So then going into, and you can even check it, this might be a good thing to check, is I just turned on Gizmo with symmetry off. If you alt click to the unmasked center, that puts Gizmo at the dead center of the object, and you click go to home, puts the object at the world center. So then if I go do mirror and weld in X space, you shouldn't see any changes here. Took a second, but that's perfectly symmetrical, so I know that's good. Now going back to this cube here, I'm just going to use this slice. I'm going to go in, let's delete a couple edge loops. Actually I'm going to delete all these for this one. Let's do Q mesh. We'll just strip away to make a little slice here. And then we could set this to subtract. So with live booleans on, with that on as subtract, we're going to get a nice clean slice there. So then first, that's going to be the first thing I want is, and actually I don't need all these duplicates. I want duplicates of the original, or the half slice. So we'll do that again here in a second. So if I leave this on, I don't need any dynamic subdivisions. I'm just going to do make boolean mesh. Oh, it's taking a little bit of time. Okay, so let's go check. So that boolean piece here is still going to be the same spot. So it's just going through and I get a nice clean cut. It's closing those holes. I love this. So now this will be part 1. Let's do duplicate 2, 3, and 4. Turn these guys off. So then this is where we're going to introduce those slices, which in my opinion it's easy just to start with the cube, make it the shape that you need it, and we'll use the just modify the cube to strip it out. So we'll insert a, I always do a star, then I replace that with the cube. So I'm going to make sure this kind of consumes that helmet there. And then what I will do is I'm going to go to Z model there, delete edge loop, and just clear out all these edges here. So that way, going back to that concept, if I'm just going to basically put edge loops at the slice points, and then I'll cut out the spaces that I need. So I got 1 across here, and then 2 framing this little earpiece. So we'll go in with edge insert. I'm going to dump in an edge about here, frame this piece here and here, and that should be good. So then I'll duplicate this, we'll call this subtract 1, duplicate 2, put that underneath 2. So we're going to do a few booleans at once. Now the helmets themselves are going to be start groups. So 1, 2, 3, 4. So this first group here with this subtraction, I won't turn that to subtract yet. Yeah, that's right. I want to select this. Okay. So I want to basically cut out all the stuff at the bottom. So with QMesh, I'm just going to punch this through. Or whoops, sorry. I want to do it this way. Brain fart. And we'll set that to subtract with transparency off. All right, so now you get a nice clean cut there at the base. So that's one. And little trick with these Boolean trees, if you click the eyeball, as long as that subtool's not selected, you click the eyeball for the one with the start group arrow, it turns all the things off until it meets the next start group. So if I click this one, these both turn on. And now I can go click this cube here. And we'll do, that's going to be 1. This will be, let's just do the front visor piece. So we'll do QMesh straight through, set that to subtract, and now you get a nice clean cut there. And then we'll turn that eyeball off, go to the next. This one, let's do the ear piece. Set that to subtract. SG, you're hopping off, man. Thanks so much for the activity, and stay safe. Yeah, exercise is really good. I love to hear that. Yeah, please check in, and if you want, just hit me up. Instagram. Oh, we are following each other now. Yeah, and I'm always around, and my ZBC account will be posting all this stuff, so you'll have access to it all. But stay safe out there, stay healthy, all that jazz, and I'll see you next stream. Okay, so that's one more cut, and let's finish this up with the back piece. So that's going to be this part. So I'm basically going to just strip out that. So I'm just using QMesh and just pushing it all the way through. Sub, turn this thing off, boom. So we got those 4 parts. Now what I want to do is make all these pieces. So I'm going to get these parts. Let's turn on the eyeballs for everything. And we're going to go to make Boolean and click this. So basically these start groups are going to make a new tool that has 4 Boolean pieces, or 4 UMesh parts. Montana Big Fork, what's up? Sorry, I missed your hey. Chris Freeze, you're saying is the way to set Z up as standard? Sorry, Chris, what do you mean by Z? Like Z axis? Okay, so this UMesh should be done, and you'll get a new tool with 4 parts. Alright, so I got my 4 parts, and now I'm going to go through and I want to figure out the order of operations of how I want to build or reconnect this stuff. So I'll probably start with the visor. The way I'm thinking of it is like it's going to be a chain reaction. So you're going to connect one to another, and then another, and then another, and close this stuff off. So for me, I'm thinking the last ones will be collapsing and pushing down here. Probably start with this piece. Basically, let's go turn off all these parts so I can kind of visualize what I'm thinking. So make the helmet with my keys, and then we'll have the earpiece. The earpiece will go connect here, right? And then we'll have the back plate, which will connect here, and then we'll have the next back plate, which I'm going to take this one. We'll do so we're going to start with 1. I'm going to reorder these and rename these. This will be part 1. This one's going to be part 7, and the top pieces will be 7 and 8. So we'll do 1, 2. Oh yeah, you're saying the Z-axis, Chris. If you wanted to do the, I guess I don't know if this is what you mean, but in symmetry, by default, symmetry is in X. So if you want it to be in Z, then you would basically just change your orientation. So like I always start where the Z-axis cone faces me, and X is on, so I know left and right is my X. If you want it the other way, you can go to transform, set it to Z, and you can store that configuration. Go to config store, and that'll set your symmetry axis in Z. I don't know if that's what you mean. Oh, you got some text here. Put the Z direction up, which matches the way the printers and CNC machines work. I know it's... I see what you're saying. No, you would have to... You can't configure... Well, what you could do is like... There's no way to predefine those things in the way that you're saying. No. You would have to basically like physically or reorient your setting like I'm talking about here with symmetry, but that would be the only way that I can think of. The only other option you can do is instead of doing Y space, you could turn on the Z-axis panel here. So with the floor grid button, maybe this is something you'd want. So instead of it being Y space is vertical, you can click the little letters here and press this thing in Z, and then you could yeah, pre-drag saying don't forget to go back to X. You are dead on. That's a pro tip right there. If you forget, all kinds of stuff happens. But this is on one option you could do is change the foreground to be X and Z, and that in itself should be store configurable. If you go to preferences, config, store, you should be able to store that. If not, you can go to draw, and you could save that floor grid, so you can always just load it back in. It's an easy thing to change too. But those would be your only options. So this is 2. This piece we're going to rename as 3. Now I'm going to duplicate 3, and you'll see the great thing about the names, it keeps that name, moves on. Now I'm going to go to deformation. I'm going to mirror this one to flip it over. Now 5 is going to be the earpiece, so we're going to duplicate that. It only keeps it by going in operations, so with this one, because it's out of order, we need to rename it. And then let's go to deformation, mirror, and then the visor will be part 6. And then let's do a quick mirror. Yeah, hopefully that's, let me know if that's helpful, Chris, or at least gives you an answer on yes or no. In that case, like that would be your only option with the floor grid and symmetry. And then 7, and we'll duplicate this, and we'll go mirror that over. Alright, so now I got my pieces. So now these are clean slices. Now, in the past, in a pinch, I've just printed like this, where I just leave those clean slices. And the problem that you run into when you're trying to reassemble all this stuff is like trying to reconnect these parts like here. This is where the keys come in. So this is just a quick test of, I got my 2 pieces here. All right, so being able to connect these pieces with keys and not have this thing, basically not have it slide in any way with glue. The glue takes up a lot of space, and it basically expands out, so it's going to expand out between and make a bigger gap. So having the keys helps to set the stuff in. If not, you're going to be sliding this stuff all over, and you have to hold it really tight with glue and just hope that it stays flush along those curved surfaces there, if you have curved surfaces. But yeah, so it's definitely helpful with these keys for multiple reasons. Now, getting on that topic, this is just a quick test with the keys that I've covered in part 3. I don't know, let me know if you guys can see this, but do you see how much of a gap is sitting between there? This gap exists because those keys, I'm going to try and put that up really close, those keys, the holes or the scale between the additive and subtractive part were a little bit too small, essentially, so there wasn't enough distance between the male and female plugs here. So essentially what I have to do is basically go through and sand down these pieces with a nice sander. I could probably whittle it down so it plugs in pretty nice. But on that topic, what I want to do now that we have this thing starting to set up is now we want to go through and we want to start making these keys for these parts. And to make those keys, what I'll do is I'm going to go turn off all these subtools except for one. We're going to start with this helmet here, and if you watched, I think it was part 3 stream, I went through and I talked about doing just a simple tapered kind of key. You can do all kinds of different keys. You can do just straight like cylinders, plugging in cubes, whatever, large, small, it doesn't really matter. This to me is a little bit easier to kind of like whittle and taper down. I like the shape of this, so yeah, that's like basically like, you know, this kind of a little plug piece here. It works well enough. The goal here is to have a little bit more space between the negative, so we can pour glue in here, and then when we connect these things, it'll be nice and snug, and it'll basically like weld, and you get a nice like flush edge here. So this one, again, kind of going back to this topic, this one is this is a failure. So this one I did the subtractive was the largest one, and the additive, this one I did 25% smaller than the subtractive. So there's a 25% gap between the two, which means I get this, it slides a lot. So we want to keep that increment pretty small for the most successful way to make this work. So it's hard to get scale factors. This is one thing I wanted to show you guys. To set this brush up, well, I'm going to go through this process from start from scratch from what I covered in part 3. So if I duplicate this, we have 2 of these cubes. If we turn on transparency, if we go into gizmo, you can scale this thing down. We're basically just creating a little bit of space. But that distance, we don't have any sort of factor. So if I hold shift, you'll see that it goes from just below gizmo, there's a little number here. So I hold shift and you'll see it goes from 1, basically goes 0.5 increments. So I can go down to 90%, 85, 80, 75, which is where that was the distance between the failure. So there's a lot of gap between that, which means it's great to have a lot of extra room to put glue in, super glue, Gorilla Glue, whatever. But I don't want that much of a gap because I'm still going to deal with the sliding. So I'm actually doing another quick key test, which like just doing a simple test print like this, just to kind of check to make sure those things work. Like these, a little bit of waste of material here, but just to check to make sure it works, not a bad idea. Once I figure out, I'm testing one right now that's 5% decrease. So holding the shift key and going in here and going down to 95. The 5% might be enough. I can't remember what I did with the original parts to have that gap from part 3, but it's a little bit too small. So it was probably more like this, like something a little bit closer, which just wasn't enough. So I want this to be 5%. Now, one little quick tip that you can play around with too, one of our developers, Joseph Dress, wrote a plugin for this. If you go to Pixelogic Download Center, in ZPlugins, he wrote a really fantastic tool that is simple but very effective to do this kind of stuff. Let's see, it's called Quick Scale. Am I missing it? Trial size. No. Oh, further down. Sorry. Quick Scaler. So you can download this, install it. I have this here. So this will help you in a pinch. In this case, I'm going to set the key up to kind of have that distance already. But the great thing about this tool is, like with Gizmo, if you hold shift, you get that little 0.5% increment increase or decrease. So that 0.5 increment sort of tool helps. But if you go to ZPlugin Quick Scaler, here you also have the option to choose a percentage, And if I say I'll set it to 10 here, and you can do increase or decrease. So if I click decrease, it's going to go through and it's going to drop that thing down. So if I undo so you can see it with transparency on, we can do decrease scale and you can drop it down. Really cool trick. Now if you have to do, what I ended up doing was I did all my keys and I realized that the distance wasn't correct. Now I got to go through and scale them down manually each one. I can use this plugin to do that really fast, and we can talk about doing it in millimeters or inches, whichever format you need it to be in. Chris is like, oh, you're saying 0.1 to 0.2 of a millimeter works pretty good for FDM. Yeah, that's a good tip. Like 0.1, 0.2, that's solid. So you could use that to your advantage to kind of go through and scale it up. So in this case, though, the keys themselves are going to be doing in different sizes. So I'm trying to find a good medium here to figure out how much space I actually need. So in this one, I'm going to do just a 10% decrease between those two parts. And I'm going to make this into a key brush. So I've got these two parts together. I'm going to take this key, do a merge down. So I have two shells sitting on top of each other. And I'm going to go to polygroups, click auto group. That's going to make this outer group, and then the inner is still, they're basically jammed together. So if I'm going to view this, I'm going to draw this from the bottom out, or basically the tip here, outwards from the mesh. So I'm going to rotate to the orthographic top view. I talked about this a little bit more in part 3. I'm going to brush, create insert mesh, new. Now I'm going to go back to my slices, and let's take a look at part 1. So what I'll get here is, if I go here to this object, I click and drag. Now this is going to be drawing it on that surface, and I'm getting two parts. So I'm getting the negative and the additive. The negative is going to be added to this part, and then the additive is going to be added to the next part, which is basically going to be part 2. So I'm getting two things out at once, and I'm just rearranging the subtools. I found this is a pretty easy way to go through and just get this stuff lined up with quickness and efficiency. So the only problem with the insert brush is it's not digging into that surface enough. So I'm going to go to brush, depth. I'm going to decrease that little dot here to that center line of the object. So that's going about halfway in, half and half. So what I might do here is go brush, maybe go just a little bit more. And that thing is going to be plugged into that space pretty well. Actually, let's go a tiny bit more. I want a little bit of dip in this negative surface here. So basically just clicking and dragging, you can kind of free flow. If you click on gizmo, you can still rotate. It's realigned to that space. So I just want this thing to sit in that border. We'll say that's good. And I'm going to go down here. I'm going to do 2 for each one just to try and avoid sliding. Right, so 2 to hold it in place. You could do more if you want. And then, so what I'll get is those things are jammed into the surface, and I want to split them off. So what I like to do in this method, hey, what's up, Paul? Tutillery? Sorry if I said that wrong. What's up, guys? Welcome to the stream. Hope you guys are well. So I want to split off those shells. I like to do this. Just Control-Shift-Click on a polygroup, or grab a chunk here that's not touching that geo, and do visibility grow all, which is Control-Shift-A. That way it's going to grow out to this shell, but it doesn't show those other key shells, which I can now go to Subtool, Split, and then Split Hidden. So I'll get these pieces on their own. Now what I want to do is, because I have the inner additive keys inside those shells, I need to split the big ones and the small ones apart together. So what I like to do is, you'll have to, one thing you'll notice is if you're zoomed up pretty far, if you Control-Shift-Click, you might accidentally grab the inside. You can see the wireframe of those edges. So you have to zoom up real close, Control-Shift-Click on Avert, Control-Shift-Drag to Inverse, and now I'm going to go click this and hide it. So now what I should have is the small ones are together, the big ones are together. So then I'm going to go to the big ones and do Split Hidden. So this one we're going to call, this will be part 1 sub. The additives are going to be part 2 add. I'm going to move that down the chain, and I'm going to start setting up a boolean tree. So this piece gets its own, that's got an additive, this piece will get a start group, and this will be subtractive. So now when I turn off this with live booleans on, oops, let's make sure that thing's turned off. Yeah, so the bigger one is going to be the larger subtractive section there, and then the smaller one is going to fit within that space with the additive part on the next piece, if that makes sense. Pro 420, thank you for tuning in. I appreciate it, and stay safe out there. I hope to see you next time. Follow me on all the socials if you ever want to communicate, all that good stuff. I'd be glad to follow. Camille, hey. Okay, so that process I just wanted to illustrate once, so you don't hear me talk about this over and over and over. I'll try not to keep repeating the actions, but that's essentially what I'm going to be doing here. So I got 2 on the side. Now, considering, like, I'm imagining that this piece here is going to be plugging in with those male objects, plugging in here, right? So it's going to go, the subtractive sections here, I should use subtractive and additive here. So subtractive on this piece, additive on this piece, probably subtractive on this side, additive going through. Now thinking about, I do have for this part though, let's turn everything off. On the top here, I want this piece here to plug in down like so. So we have an additive attached to this one and a subtractive in the visor. So I need to do a couple more keys for this visor. I'm going to go in here and do one there, and then I'm also forgetting the visor has to connect across here. So here I'm going to go in and do another one to kind of connect that piece. So then those are all jammed into that surface. Let's clear the mask. Control Shift click on the mesh. And do that grow all split hidden. So now those things are all already grouped. So this is where you just kind of got to zoom in. Control Shift clicks, click, reverse. So big ones, I always just check with reverse to make sure. So I'm going to call this one part 1 sub, and then do split hidden. And this one will be, these are going to be 2 different ones. So this is going to be, this key here is going to be attached to the visor on the other side there, which is part 6. So let's break those off real fast. Part 6, we'll call this add. I'm going to move that one down. And I'll set a start group. I'm going to set a start group for the rest of these parts just to make sure that stuff is all set up and good. So the keys don't get start groups if you aren't aware. Alright, so then what's left? I got to set up these guys too. So these ones are going to go with that one, that one. This is going to be part 7 add. Move that all the way down. So that way I get those pieces are now attached here. So I'll come back to that. I might be shuffling stuff down here to that little chunk there. Alright, so then going back to this piece, we got now our, let's turn this on, this one, this one. These guys are going to be subtractive. These are subtractive. Boom, there we go. Alright, so we're getting all these keys working on this part here. Moving on to the next piece. I don't need any more. Let's go grab this earpiece. This one now has the adds on that side. Now we need to do subtractive on the top, and I'm going to do subtractive here as well. So while I'm going through and doing this stuff, tell me how many of you guys are working from home, how many of you guys are completely off. I wonder what's, luckily for us, you're working in creative, you work in ZBrush full time, you get the ability to continue to do what you do normally pretty much anywhere as long as you got a computer, which we're very fortunate. I feel very thankful that we have that opportunity to do that. And this is going to be part 7 add. Paulo, you're working from home. That's great. I'm glad that's an option for you. It's luckily I was saying earlier, we at Pixelogic we all have our own personal office space, and we take an extra precautions, but we're able to, for the most part, continue doing our job. Some people are home if they need to be, you know, with family and things like that. But oh, that one's an add, and these are subtract. Chris, you're at work. Nice. Is that good or bad for you? You okay with it? I'm actually, I love being in my office. So project management for Paulo. Yeah. I don't want that thing to consume too much of that space. It's just enough. Split. Alright, part 2 sub. Set that one to sub. This one's going to be part 3 add. Alright, so this, I don't know, this process is pretty repetitive at this point. Like, I'm just kind of going through an order of operations, kind of like thinking about the puzzle piece here. 400 plus cases, wow. And you're in Portugal, you said. Yeah, I've heard in Portugal and Spain is tough. We're all here for you. I really feel that stress. I can't imagine what that's like for you guys. We're trying our best in the States to minimize this stuff before it gets too bad, but it's so unfortunate. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you in these desperate times tuning in, being here. Hopefully doing ZBrush and this stuff helps in some way just to keep you occupied. I know it does for me. Okay, so that one's good. This one, now I've got those keys there, so then all I gotta do is get the subtractives here on the top. And you could really think about, I mean, this is where you can get creative with all kinds of different, you can look up what other people are doing with keys. I've seen all kinds of crazy keys outside of these just like basic tapers. Get things that snap together. Those are definitely more advanced, but very functional. Snapping is, if you can make that work, the most ideal, I think. Part 3 sub. And this one's going to be part 7 add. And I'll move that one down the list. Alright, and boom. This one's add. Cool. Alright, now then moving on to the next piece. So, like I was kind of saying, going all the way around, this next piece is going to connect here. So this one I'm going to do a little subtractive on this left side. Don't have as much space here. This is kind of where I was saying like the keys are going to be a little different scale. Alright, so I might, regardless of if they were all going to be exactly the same size and evenly distributed across, that's where you could start playing around with like setting it to a specific like dimension. If you want to do like Chris was saying, like 0.1 or 0.3 millimeters of space between that additive and subtractive space, you could do that. In this case, it's going to change because I'm physically scaling it up or down. So in this case, I'm kind of just eyeballing it, and this is where, like the YouTube commenter was saying, the post work could change. I might have to do a little bit more sanding if it's not enough space, but I'm okay with it. As long as I can keep this stuff flush and not have as much of a gap. Like what I don't want to have is, again, going back to this thing, like this is way too much. Or which one was it? Yeah, like this. Like that gap is a lot. So I got to whittle that stuff down a lot to make that thing nice and flush on that surface. So then let's go grab this piece here. Split hidden. Oh, nice. Winston, you said you've been experimenting with magnets. Yeah, that is I see most friends that I have that are working in that sector, especially for collectibles and things, magnets are just the best, right? A good strong magnet does a lot. Especially if you have a figure that you want to, like, I see a lot of that for like toys and statues and things where you want to take the arms off, that kind of stuff. That's great, like sideshow collectible stuff. So that's going to be a sub. This is going to be part 4 add. Move this one down, turn that off. So now what we should get is set this one to subtract. There we go. So I might take all these subtractives, I'm going to merge this together. And so I get my subtractives in one, and I get my adds in one if I have it. Let's turn this off. Go here. So now we should have those adds here. Now I'm going to go back around the horn. This is going to be another subtractive. If you do them in steps, you can change how much time you have to deal with the splitting if you have like keys that are going to go to different parts. So I might do just these two at a time. Sub, this is going to be 7 add. So you'll see the 7s, like the top parts here, I'm having to move those all the way down. Alright, now moving on to this guy. So this is going to be whatever. We could do a same setup. Now a cool trick, one thing that happens with live booleans is you'll see if I have the mesh that we're subtracting from selected, when I draw it, you'll see it doesn't do the subtraction. But if I go select any one of these other subtools, it still sees and draws and renders that object there. So if I click and drag with this thing set to sub, it's actually going to show me the subtraction of that piece, which is pretty cool. However, in this case, we're going to have to disable this here in a second. When I go through and I solve this thing out, I'm going to need to split this stuff off and change it. So, but it's a nice trick. If you have a subtool set to subtractive, you can go through and just see those booleans happening on the fly. Oh, let's see. This one. I'm going to do a split hidden. Let's go here now and take care of these guys. Side effects, what is up? Thanks for tuning in. How are you doing? Hopefully you're safe and well. Quarantined like the rest of us. Nice, man. That's so great to hear. So this is going to be part 5 add. Are you, I'm great. I'm doing really well. Thanks for asking. Staying as healthy as I can. I'm still here. I was telling everyone who's still here, so I apologize if I'm repeating, but we've been at Pixelogic. Some of us are still here in the office. We've got a lot of space here, so we're very safe, and we're just taking extra precautions to keep our distance from each other. Some people are working from home. Still getting I'm working out every day almost, just trying to stay healthy and fit just in case that cold comes. But, you know, being optimistic, keeping myself busy with ZBrush. Hopefully the same for you. Okay, so this one is great. Yes, we do need to be patient. You're absolutely right. That's such a great point, and I am truly optimistic about it. I mean, I care most about not passing off this to anyone else. Like I myself, I do have asthma, so technically speaking, I'm at risk. But I try to stay really healthy. I work out 5-6 days a week. I run a lot. Trying to eat healthy, stay in that space, and you know, as long as we stay positive and don't get freaked out, I think that's the best thing we can do. Most importantly, I just don't want to get sick and pass it off to anyone else that is truly at risk. So that to me is like priority number one, you know. Oh yeah, Vertex School, sculpting and learning XGen these days. Nice. What are your ambitions with XGen? Just trying to brush up on tools, or you got a project that you're working on? This is going to be part 8, additive. Let me see what you said. Hair for female portrait. Shyvana concept from League of Legends. Oh, nice. That's a great character. That'll be a sweet concept. I love that. Yeah, that's cool. I love that. I truly love that. To me, that's like, I don't know. If I'm in a, oh, that's the ad. Did I put the wrong one in 8? Yeah, this one is ad. So part 5, this one needs to be, I just labeled it wrong. Changing her a bit into my view the concept. Hey, what's up, Mim? Animator, you're testing. Oh, hold up. Man, you guys are dropping so many comments. I love it. I feel like I'm missing part of the conversation. Nurim F, you're saying symmetry. I don't know if that's a question or a statement. Just symmetry. Yeah. Anyways, no, that's cool. I was gonna say I do love. I just love project-based things when you put yourself to task and you're learning some new tools. It's a really great way to quickly adopt new things into your workflow, you know, what you might not do otherwise. Like make a project that's just like to learn something new, you know, and implement that tool. It's pretty awesome. Probably you're saying which software do I use for render? All my stuff like these renders here, KeyShot. KeyShot's like kind of my. I just love KeyShot because I can streamline straight to everything. I can do some really great stuff with KeyShot. You guys can check out. Like I haven't ported all my stuff over to ZBC, but I do have some stuff on ArtStation. Like my ZBC, like I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, I have I'm posting a thread with all the stuff in here, but I like to mess around with like stuff like this, like hard surface. I like to do a lot of like all ZBrush and just KeyShot renders. I don't have to deal with any kind of like remeshing or UVs and stuff. I just drag and drop. Sometimes, you know, I'll go. I was trained in Maya for a long time, so I used to use Mental Ray originally, V-Ray a lot. I've been learning RenderMan over the years, but in terms of conceptual, quick ideas, getting the stuff out, KeyShot to me is amazing, and we have a great relationship with them, so it really helps. Yeah, like here, let me see if I pulled up in the other stream. Board. Let me see if I can find a render here. What are you? Okay. Let me just get this last bit of keys. Paulo, what about you? What's your go-to renderer? Part 5 sub. This is going to be part 6 add. Okay, set that to sub. There we go. Oh yeah, here's one. I brought this one up in the stream. The only reason why I'm bringing it up, but KeyShot, I love the drag and drop mentality. I can just make something with ZBrush rendered over. Boom, I get something sweet. I can mess around with that for a while. Then, of course, like if you work in industries, of course, like it changes. Like for product stuff, I love to do product work and like physical stuff. So for me, the conceptualization of it, getting these kinds of renders in KeyShot, you know, is super fun. Here, I'm zooming and clicking to small parts. Can I explain? Yeah, sure. If you're just tuning in, I started off with a lot of explanation for this, but essentially what I'm doing is I'm going through and I'm setting up my keys for the final, all these parts. So I got all these basic shells and pieces. Let's see if we can start back. This stream, by the way, it's all replayed. If you're just checking this out and you haven't seen any of the other streams, let's go back to view. If you go to ZBrushLive.com and you go to presenters, you'll find me, Solomon Blair, and you'll see in here my last 3 is a 4-part series. This is the last stream, 1, 2, and 3. Basically going through all the build process. Today I'm talking about final output, just breaking this stuff up to print. So going through and getting stuff for 3D print. I'm actually getting these parts out right now as we speak. But this is the keying process. So going through and just breaking up into pieces that fit within the build space and then dropping in these keys. So what I'm doing right now, if I go to, I'm systematically kind of going down the list of parts here and adding additive and subtractive parts that are going to basically allow me to reassemble all this stuff. So let's take a look at this last one. I got this thing done. Let's go do this one here. So you'll see I have an additive plug that's going to connect to this piece here, which has a subtractive. So then the last bit here is I have this top part. Let's go down here. Not 7, but let's go to 8 here. This piece is basically going to need to plug into the top. So for this piece here, what I want is subtractive on this part and then additive on the top. So I've broken this stuff up. Again, you'll be able to go through and rewatch the replay to kind of see this more in action, which I explained at the beginning of the process. But in this case, what I'm doing is I'm making a key that's got an additive and a subtractive in it. I'm just clicking and dragging with an insert brush. And then what I'm doing is I'm basically just doing 2 so I don't get any, when I reassemble, I'm just trying to avoid getting any kind of like slides. If you get 2 keys like this, if the gap between these 2 things is too great, you get a little bit of slide and it's hard to reassemble, and you want that slice to be nice and clean. So we're going to use glue and things like that to reassemble, but I'm just dragging and dropping. I'm using the visibility. Like if I Control-Shift-Click on a part here, I want to split off these pieces from being merged. So I'm just grabbing a polygroup, Control-Shift-Click it, go into visibility, and I'm doing Grow All. So Control-Shift-A, and then that basically hides those keys from the top. So it's hiding this piece and this piece. So with it hidden, I'm going to Subtool, doing Split Hidden. Now I get these parts, which on the inside you'll see there's a smaller one. So they're basically jammed together. So I'm just Control-Shift-Clicking to isolate out the big ones. So big ones, small ones. And with the big one visible, I'm doing Subtool, Split Hidden. So the big ones are going to be boolean subtraction. So I'm doing, this is part 6, I'm calling it sub. And I'm setting it to, you'll see if I set it to subtract, and I turn, this one's going to go as a part of that top group down here, which will be part 8 add. We'll turn that off. So now if we just take a look here, you'll see that these pieces that I just separated, those are subtracting in, and then with the other piece down here, those are mirrored in that same position, and you'll see they're a little bit smaller, so they're going to fit in there nice, and those are additive parts. Which I think now, if I go here, sorry, you guys are throwing out more questions too. Paulo, you're saying you're new to ZBrush, no render. Ah, okay. Well, then we have a great relationship with KeyShot. I mean, I can go once if I have a little extra time, I can send this thing over and show you guys just some of the render processes I went through for this helmet. So if I pull this up, like you know, the final, you know, kind of getting like some pretty cool. What I like about, again, with KeyShot is I can get some really nice like leathery materials. I want to do for this stuff, I want to, with ZBrush, I want to bump out those details, so when I print it I get a little bit of leather texture, so when I paint it I can kind of get that look. Otherwise I have to do it all with paint. But just getting the stuff with KeyShot, I can go through and talk about just doing some quick and easy renders. Niram, you're saying mirror with world mirror, what's the difference? Are you talking about deformation mirror? Or are you talking about mirror and weld? Nigel, thank you for the compliments. Oh, this calls for another Bill Murray. Thank you. Seriously, it means a lot. I appreciate those compliments so much. And okay, hopefully I'm saying it correctly. Mahir. Yeah, I'm glad to illustrate. I apologize if I was running through it. I tried to explain it earlier and not bore everybody with droning on about the same stuff over and over. Animator, you're saying, did I do a lot of Eckershey's studies when I first started out and even now? That's a good question. I did a ton, actually. The first 5 to 7 or 8 years of ZBrush was like, all I wanted to do was organic. And I did a lot of humans and a lot of anatomy and figure and form and all that kind of stuff. Now, where I spend my time is I think I did a lot of that, and I just find that I'm having, the last few years or so, I've been doing a lot more hard surface, more model making, combining some of the sculptural stuff. I sculpt as much as I can. I teach a lot of like character design and ZBrush courses on those things, so I get to sculpt in those senses. But I find myself wanting to explore new things all the time, so I kind of, in the background, yes, a ton of anatomy. That's always, I always recommend that's the best place to start is organic, because it's the easiest way to get used to the foundations of what ZBrush really is, which is sculpture and the brushes and all of that. All of these things to me are more intermediate level skill sets. At a basic level, you can use these tools in your everyday life while you're working, like, to build parts and pieces to a character or a figure, clothing parts and belts and things like that. It helps, but sculpture is truly like the foundation of ZBrush. So I think that's a great thing to do, and I started with that myself, and I think it was the best thing I could have ever done. Because now when I'm doing this kind of stuff, I feel like I already know so much, and I'm able to kind of use all my skills together now to do anything really. So it looks like I've got all my parts pretty much nailed in here. The only thing I need to do is the top piece. So this one to this one here. These ones don't have any keys. So let's go. I'm going to go to, what I'm thinking is I'll probably start with the tops first. I'll reassemble those. We'll talk about how this is going to play out. But I'm going to go here to this piece now, go back and grab that insert key. And I'm going to just drag and drop. Don't have solo on. I'm going to turn this thing off. If solo's on, you won't see the model when you draw it. So like when you here and you go boom, you see it disappears. So I don't want solo on. I just want to see this piece. And maybe I'll do 3 since it's such a large piece. Looks like these ones I added to the wrong one. This is actually going to be 8 add. Let's rename that 8. There we go. And go back here. So then, because you're doing insert meshes, you're dragging them on that surface, so you need to isolate and separate out those tools. For me, easiest way is just Control-Shift-Click on a part, Control-Shift-A to grow out to the shell, and then do a split hidden. Then you'll get these guys on their own, and let's just go do select the outer group, reverse selection, click. So we should get big ones, small ones. Big ones, we'll do split hidden. So this one, I'm going to do 7 sub for the big. Set that to subtract. This one will be 8 add. We're going to move that down below 8. Now what we should get is subtractions here. Great. We can turn that off, turn this on, and we should get additives there. And I believe that is everything, which is really great. So, a little bit of droning on, but you can get that thing done if you, this is a lot more of a complex breakup, I think, into a lot of smaller parts if you have to do something like this. But now we want to generate these booleans, so let's go turn everything on. VFX Norman, you're saying how you do that? How do I do what? Maybe you were saying that in response to something I was just saying, which I probably already forgot. What exactly are you referring to? And I'm happy to go back. And also, if it's too much to explain, this will be available on replay forever on YouTube. So if you want me to illustrate it now with words, I'm happy to, and hopefully that will give you enough. But I'll look for your comment. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going. Let's see. Okay, so I got everything turned on. I want to go to boolean here, and I want to make all the boolean parts with these keys. So setting it up this way, following it this sort of procedure, you're getting all your adds and subtracts on the parts. The start groups are basically putting them into a single part in the boolean. So when I click make boolean, it's going to look at each start group. It's going to take this piece and go all the ones that don't have a start group. It's going to do the subs and the adds, and it's going to make that into a piece. And it's going to do that for each one of these start group parts. About smoothing. Hold on, I'll come back to that. Animator, you're saying, thanks for answering a very cool sculpt. I just started learning in school. We'll be doing organic streams in the future. Oh yeah, organics for sure. Actually, like I was, if you tuned in a little bit later, I'm planning on, like, I do organic stuff. I like to get into that kind of stuff. I was doing ZBrush mashups, which is like taking two themes and combining them to make something. So I took the last streams I was doing before. I'm doing a lot more streaming now than I ever did. So just FYI that I'm streaming twice a month now, and that's something I never used to do. I was always kind of doing it a month, and I'd skip a month, and I'd come back a month. So I don't have that many streams, but this project is the start of me doing this twice a month, potentially more for the rest of the year and beyond. So I want to get back to organics and basically just do different project builds of all different types. So it could be organic for a couple series, or it could be hard surface, you know, whatever. I want to do stuff that you guys want to see, and I'm interested in doing. So this thing, like I was kind of playing around with this like ZBrush mashup idea of doing Luigi as Gaff from Blade Runner, and I might do like a Mario as Harrison Ford's character, and have like a scene where their Super Mario karts are the Blade Runner cop cars. I have this whole thing in my head that I want to do like a full scene. I want to render it, maybe do some real-time render stuff, maybe, or do it in KeyShot. We'll see. That's something I'm playing around with for the next project to complete after we finish up with this helmet. But yeah, thanks. I'm glad you guys love that. If you let me know if you're down for that theme. I'm happy to do that. Honestly, I think I've been itching to like complete this project, and these renders are like super quick and fast. We can make this stuff look way better, but I want to keep that going. You guys let me know if you love that. But VFX, you said about smoothing. Okay, got that. I guess maybe it was answered. Okay, sweet. You guys are giving me some good feedback on that. I love it. So the Boolean process just finished. What it does is we got the subtool, the tree here with all the Boolean setups. So what I tend to do is I'll save this version if I ever need to come back to it and make changes to it. But the U-meshes, if we go here, it makes a new tool that's going to have all these parts. So what you should see now is these are generated, the keys are applied. If you look at the polyframe here, you'll get the actual Booleans are added into that space, and it's all been, you know, nice clean slices, and it's all good to go. So what I should get now is all these parts. I'm just going to go through and kind of check, make sure everything looks good. There's no errors with these parts. Yeah, all this stuff is looking pretty good. So the goal here now will be, let's turn that dynamic off, so just kind of look at the progression. So we'll print out this first part, second part, right? This one is going to plug in here. Third part, I'm just kind of trying to visualize this for myself too. Third part basically plugs in there. Fourth part is going to go like so, connect here. 5 will go like so, and then 6, this will be the last piece on the bottom that's going to connect here. Now I do have a couple things happening. I've got this has got to connect across here, and then this one's also got to touch here. So what I'm just hoping is I'm going to go through and probably adhere all these together, glue them, get them solid, and then this one, because it's plastic, it will flex and bend a little bit, right? So I should be able to force that key into the front there pretty well, and then just kind of like glue it together. and it should be fine. So that last little piece, and then what I'll get at the end is these two pieces. Now I'm thinking for these two, I might take those separately and just basically connect. Let's go. Let's turn on transpose all. Control Shift click. We can bring these up. So if you don't know with Gizmo, if you turn Gizmo on by clicking move or scale, you can click transpose all. If you Control Shift and click an object, it isolates it, which allows you to move just that subtool. You can also Control Shift click another one, and you can move those up together, clear it, and then here I could maybe just go. So basically I'm going to take these guys, move those together, and then snap it down. Pre-drag. I'm just trying to see if that's a question. With the Z model and live booleans for the most part, Sheldon. Oh, I think you're answering someone. Yeah, so Sheldon Venter, what's up, man? You were asking about smooth surface. Yeah, so if you go watch the I'm guessing you didn't watch the other streams. So if you go to ZBrushLive.com, ZBrushLive.com, go to presenters. In the presenters list, you'll find me. And I'll just post this in the chat. And you can go all the way down, go down a little bit. You'll see the 3-part series. So part 1, I did a lot of part 1. This basically, I'll click on it real fast. This exists on YouTube. Let's go to YouTube. Just a quick thing, if you guys haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, we would love your subscriptions. We love to get feedback from you guys. All this stuff we do on ZBrush Live is here, if you aren't already aware of that. But here you'll see in this first stream, I went through basically using a system called Paneloops to get these really hard, complex shapes are tough to do. Most people would tell you you could do it with topology, way easier. To each their own. In my opinion, this system allows me to work sculpturally, move stuff around with a brush, and there's a little polishing trick that I show you guys on how to get these clean, sharp edges. And then going through and doing, like basically you'll get a clean sort of like remesh here. You get that nice clean shape. All with ZBrush, no topology tools needed. You can move stuff around. It's very organic and freeing. And then building all the other parts, those are basically covered in all 3 of these streams. So building everything. So all the stuff you'll see here, if I pull this up real fast, everything is Dynamesh sculpting or Z modeler building to get all these clean shapes, and then a little bit of like remeshing stuff together towards the end, including the earpiece. Right, so the earpiece, you know, there's some cool stuff that I'm like trying to play around. Was playing around with this project, thinking like, what if you made a cell phone case like that earpiece from Mandalorian and make that a phone case so you can put on. I don't know. You guys tell me if you would buy that or not. I was thinking about trying to make it, but of course it's this is like protected and there's rights and everything. I might just like make that as like a fun project for myself, or I guess maybe that's a call out to Disney and Lucasfilm to maybe make something like that, because I would buy that for sure. But I was kind of just like, okay, I'm gonna see what that looks like and play around with it. Yeah, right? Animators in. I would too. I'm an ultra nerd for that kind of stuff, so it might be so niche that like people might not recognize what it is, but you know what it is. JakeBot, I am surviving. What's up, man? Still here in the Pixelogic offices, very safe. We're taking extra precautions, but we're all doing just fine. Yeah, VFX. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Yeah, check out all those streams. I cover a lot of stuff, and I apologize if I'm not explaining everything in depthly here. But for this particular series, my goal for this is I want to do project-based stuff and go through everything from start to finish, and so that way you guys can use this in your own stuff. And this workflow, in my opinion, you can use for just about any helmet, including using ZModeler to build all these parts. Particularly stuff I talk about in that first stream to get the polish by features stuff going to do these kinds of shapes. I think you could do all kinds of stuff with. So then, anyway, so I talked about the preparation for reassembly, And now that I have all these parts, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these guys and I'm going to go to merge. I'm going to click merge visible. So I'm going to merge all these slices into one single subtool. That way, now finally we can go back to our our scale master scene. And I'm going to turn off the UMesh scale safe head. So now if I go back to this scene and I do insert, I'm going to insert that merged group of parts. So what you'll see is because we cloned it off originally, we didn't change any of the scale. We most importantly didn't do any kind of scaling like this. We don't want to touch we want to leave the model where it is and not change any of the scale. Otherwise, when you bring it in here, it has to be readjusted. So this thing should be in the exact same position outside of, I did move it with the gizmo. If you were watching during the stream, the object, I alt clicked here and then I clicked the home axis, which sent it to home. So you'll see these guys are a little bit off. If I go to this piece and if I do symmetry off, alt click, go to unmask center, and then click the home axis, now what you should see is these guys sit exactly the same spot. So this one and this one, two different models, exactly the same spot. So that's just FYI, it's all the same and should be perfectly scaled at this point. So I basically just checked with this piece. If you watched at the beginning of the stream, I went through and just used selection brushes to check if they're going to fit. So I know these slices are going to fit. Now all I need to do is split these guys back off into parts. So what I'm going to do is, you'll see that there's a lot of like polygroups that are combined from the original mesh, but those pieces themselves, the UMesh parts, are their own closed shells. So if you go to polygroup and you do auto group, it's going to auto group each major shell with the keys additive and subtractive. And now what I can do is, I want to just label these in order. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, or 8. I think it goes up to 8, and I want to do them in the correct order. If we just do, we could go to split and group split. That's just going to break them up in a random selective order. So if we just go in, I'm going to Control Shift click here. You should see I got my keys still there. I'm going to do split hidden. So if I name this one part 1, and we'll name this one part 2. This is a little ZBrush tip if you don't want to have to rename all the subtools. If I Control Shift click here, this one's keeping the name. If I do split hidden, the next one that gets split takes the number and goes in increment up. So now I can grab this part. This will be 3. Grab this one. And just kind of keep going through. I just want these to be in the correct order when I print them, so that way when I get it off the printer, I'll be able to check that they're going to connect while it's going. So I'm going to export the files in this exact order and print them in this exact order as well, just to be smart about it, or as smart as I can. This will be 7, and that's 8. Yeah, pre-drag's got it. Replicator 2. This is why we had to make that simple box inside ZBrush as a mock-up of the printer, which makes sure all the parts, yeah, perfect. Pre-drag, nice, I love it. Okay, part 1 is off. Yeah, so this here is our MakerBot replicator bed to scale. So the helmet right now doesn't fit in those parts. So now what we're going to do is, we got all of our parts split with our keys. This is just a pre-visualization that you can do. Simplify is not, as far as I know, I'm not an expert on Simplify, but it doesn't keep the position. So I can go through and I can check, okay, this piece is going to fit great in that MakerBot Replicator 2 bed. The supports are going to grow from here probably. I can figure out which way I want it to print. I don't want any of the supports to hit the good stuff on the outside. And I also, you want to try to avoid those supports from hitting the keyholes, right? Like especially where you have gaps, you might have to build supports to make that piece work. So the way you align objects in print beds, it really just makes a difference. So going vertical, too much distance could be problematic. There's all kinds of things. Sometimes you really just don't know until you experiment and you use it, and you'll kind of start to see where you need supports, what angle is better. I did do this angle right here. I did exactly for this part here. So I angled it, roughly like that. All the supports on the inside. It's still actually pretty clean here. I still got my keys on the top. The only problem with this one is that it was a little too big. But anyways, the Simplify 3D program that we'll use is pretty awesome, and the supports tear off so clean and smooth. So on the ZBrush side, we can kind of just use this as a quick reference guide. And let's go in here. Like, this is where I might just start rearranging these parts and putting them into place. So center the gizmo to the object, which is alt clicking the go to unmask center, and then now I'm just kind of checking, figuring out my position, where I want this stuff to go. So here, if you do it this way, like, supports are basically going to grow up. They might be hitting that piece. If you were to angle it, say like this, you might minimize that risk a little bit. You know, the angle in which you do this stuff where you get basically curvature happening. Another thing I can point out is, like, when you get curves, you'll start to get this kind of like layer buildup here, like right there. And that usually happens at those curved surfaces that gets to the top. But again, I did this stuff at pretty low settings, low quality, so it's just a little bit extra cleanup. I get the pieces faster, which I love, and I'll do a little bit of sanding. I don't mind getting my hands dirty. Let's see. FX, you said 3D printer for the win. The part seems small enough to fit into a photon. Yeah, I guess so. I don't even know what the photon print bed is, but this probably will fit on most FDM printers, honestly. This probably the Endor. I don't know. The Endor is more square, I believe, or the Ender, but yeah, this to me is like pretty restrictive. Like, ideally, you know, I want to be printing on that Form 3L. If the material was more affordable, I would totally be doing that probably straight away, but I might do that later if I can, or hit up one of you guys if you're offering to print. ABS over PLA for sanding. Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, what I'm thinking is I'll probably do a primer to add just a little bit of layer on top, and I'll sand that down. As far as I've seen with the parts I'm getting, I don't have much sanding to do outside of the keys. The keys are the only things that maybe need to be modified so they plug in and get a little bit more flush. Alright, so this is basically all I'm doing with these parts, is I'm just realigning. I'm not scaling these in any way. These need to stay within this space. Alright, so then once we get these parts all kind of like lined up, I don't want that to be, that probably have to be what it is. Get these guys in here. The Guardian of Azeroth, you're saying, how will you compensate for shrinkage during the printing? That's a good question. For this, in this case, what I did was I actually overcompensated a little bit with the print. Like, doing it this way, you know, if you needed to get exact sort of distance and you know how much shrinkage you're gonna get, if you know your printer that well, which if you're a pro and you work in that industry, you absolutely do, then you're gonna have to implement some more tools. In this case, what I did was I just made sure that I did the bounding box scale. You can check back and tune in so that the furthest points out I measured with my objects. I know exactly how wide it is from ear to ear, and I basically just gave myself a little bit more space within that space in here. So the helmet, I've seen it with a lot of cosplayers. Like, if you just look up, I saw a pretty sweet Mandalorian cosplay costume that somebody had at like a conference or something like a month or two ago before they all got shut down, and it was an amazing cosplay costume. But the helmet, if you look at it, is a little big. Like, and even if you look at the Mandalorian in the show, in my opinion, it has to be big enough where they're on set, they have to be able to take it on and off. It doesn't have any crazy futuristic mechanical things that spiral out and open up. That's a CG effect, right? But in the practical world, maybe they, you know, have like a way to like detach it or pull it off. But from what I see, it looks like just straight on and off. So there's a little bit of room in there. For me, this is more of just like a novelty, so I'm not too worried about if there's a tiny bit of shrinkage. And even if I have to like jam that thing on, it's more of just like a visual piece anyways. I want it to be one-to-one, and I do want to be able to put it on. So I just gave it a little bit of extra space to make sure that that thing is going to be able to go on. So if the math is right, at least scale master output is going to be perfectly accurate. It really just comes down to the numbers that I've plugged in so far. So all these pieces, now that we have these guys at least lined up, now I want to go through, let's do these last two. So we'll do part 7 first. And I'm just going to put it in place just for the sake of doing it. One thing I've found is if this stuff is sitting at the world center, like we are doing, this is all at the world center, like MakerBot desktop software, for example, if these pieces are aligned and oriented like this, the files come into MakerBot desktop exactly as you see. In Simplify, when I import these, they don't necessarily keep the position in the rotation, so I have to redo that stuff there. I haven't figured out how to do that, or if it's even an option that they offer, but I will. Or maybe you guys know if any of you guys use Simplify. Yeah, Sheldon say, hope you'll be able to breathe. I know. I mean, there's oxygen that comes underneath. I'll rig up like an oxygen tube if I have to. It might be a little tight, but there's enough space between that, like, this gap here, like, right in there. That's all open. So, like, and that visor I'm going to do is going to be somewhat transparent. Side effects are saying, a few days ago I was playing with Remnant and got infected, and my character started coughing and I couldn't shoot. That's so funny. So you're saying that this would be like my authentic N95 respirator mask? If I could just close this thing out and just wear this in public, that would actually be pretty rad. That way we wouldn't be using up all the resources that our hospitals need. Yeah, it's too bad I didn't have this ready for mass production in time. Yeah, unfortunately this is never something that I could reproduce. This is just for me, just for you guys, educational purposes only. I mean, I guess I could use this as like a cosplay thing for myself or others, but okay, so we got these parts. I don't know if you tried the game, but it's awesome. Yeah, I haven't played the game actually. Yeah, the only games I've been playing lately, I'm almost embarrassed to say it, but I'm such a nerd for it. I've been playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare like crazy. Before that, though, I was playing a lot of Red Dead Redemption 2. I'm a pretty big story-driven person outside of the Call of Duties, but Remnant. Oh, I did see a trailer for that. That looks pretty rad. Is it actually stylized like this? Oh, dude, that looks really cool. I'm into that. It's got this really cool painterly kind of effect. I like it. Unreal game. I'm into that. That's a good call out. FX Node, you were asking resin is pricey for volume. Yeah, you were saying that earlier. Sorry, I didn't see that comment. 3D printing molds or casting. If you're asking if that's what I'm going to do, that would be... I would have to get into that with another stream. We actually, if you aren't aware, we did implement recently in ZBrush 2020. We implemented some just basic stuff for like draft angle. So you can render and view draft angles. You can make adjustments to these things for molds and cast if you need to get into that. In this case, yeah, if I wanted to go through a mass produce, that would be the most ideal way to go about it to get the best quality version. But I'm kind of going on the lazy side, if you can consider 3D printing lazy, which I can. And also for me, this is more like I want to see how much I can get out of the MakerBot. If I can get this thing to look pristine in a cleaned up version and paint it, that would be pretty nice. But I'll have to, for another project base, I'll consider doing one for mold and cast. That's a really great point. I want to show more of that, because that is a relatively new feature in ZBrush to be able to have that at our disposal. Mandalorian respirator for the win. Alright guys, we're doing it. This is it. You guys petition to get Disney and Lucasfilm to let us do it, and Maybe it can be a thing. I'll send them these models if they want it. How about that? They can take this and reproduce. Ivan, you're saying is there a way to tweak materials inside of ZBrush? Yeah, for sure. ZBrush materials, if you, let's just grab an object here. So I go to, so you have two types real quick on this topic. You have matte caps, you have standards. Matte caps are baked in lighting information. Standards are using a system of sliders and operations that we can modify, but it's using global lighting. So for example, if I go to this soft plastic here, if you go to the light source, you can change the light source and you see that updates on the model. So that's using ZBrush's global lighting system. If you go to a matte cap material, so I grab this red one, if you change that light, you see you get no update or change. So what matte caps are basically taking pre-rendered objects or rendered materials, combining them, and giving you sliders and controllers to modify. So if you go to, let's grab the material palette. If you go into the modifiers, so this is with all matte caps, you'll have an intensity A and B. If you look at the bottom, you'll see you get two rendered spheres. So you're getting two things plugging into different parts of the model. So basically cavity. So A and B, you can increase the level of A. You can increase the level of B. You can combine and change these things around. With matte caps, you can only play around with these sliders. So you get cavity detection. Some of these matte caps might have a little bit some different settings, but cavity transition between the two. So you'll see with a lot of sliders, you get a -1 and a +1 and 0. That's going between the left and right side of these two. So you can play around with these things. And then you can start introducing other things like monochromatic. You can start playing around with color adjustments. Now, if you look at a standard material, so we'll go back to Skin Shade 4 is a standard material. These ones give you more of the standardized sliders and configuration options with the material. So ambient lighting, diffuse, specularity, all that kind of stuff you'd get in another system. So you can control ambient light, you can affect diffuse. So that all this plays a part into the lights too. So the more lights you have, the more these the sliders will be affected by that. So you can go and you can say like increase specularity. Something you could do with spec is like you get curvature. So you can increase more focal shift, which will give this like, let's bring that diffuse down. So you see with spec up really high, you get more specular light, and if you give this curvature a lot more, you get a smaller sort of hot spot. Right? And there's a lot of things that we can do with this, but transparency, this is a renderable option, so this is not going to affect the preview display of the material. Reflectivity, you can basically, reflectivity is like, if you get into backgrounds, you can go into a texture, you can implement an image, right? You can start to get into like more reflectivity from the image itself. These are things that we can do inside of ZBrush. So those are good places to start. Hopefully that gives you something to work with. There's a lot that can be done. Unfortunately, like I wouldn't have enough time to talk about it all, but you know, this kind of stuff is pretty great within ZBrush to work in. I tend to work with no backgrounds. I like materials that I use the matte cap Pearl because it shows off my edges and highlights things pretty well. Paolo's asking, what do I do for a living? This is pretty much it, Paolo. I'm a developer here at Pixelogic. I help contribute to making ZBrush. I work on the creative side, so a lot of my efforts are helping in education, tools, feature ideas, all kinds of crazy things. But you'll see any of us Pixelogic developers are doing a lot of different things. We all are, you know, contributing to the company and the vision of what ZBrush is and Pixelogic is. So we're all doing a lot of different things here. But this is pretty much, I'm in ZBrush world space all day, every day. And I'm also a part-time instructor, which I also teach ZBrush part-time at colleges and places like that. And don't apologize for asking. It's no problem. Guillermo's asking for oxided plate. Yeah, that'd be nice. I think that's what I want it to look like. Sculpts, you're asking about materials. I know I can create matte cap with Matte Cap Maker, but not sure about standard materials. Yeah, standard materials, you're not going to get... So, like, what you can do with standard materials on that part is, okay, so, like, Yeah, with a matte cap you can customize it. Like if you have an image, you turn on like an image or something like that. Or rather, let's turn that off. You can go to light caps. You can load up let's do a new light. Actually, I haven't touched this in so long. I'm trying to remember what I wanted to show here. Oh, create background. I want to do light caps from background. So if you have a matte cap selected, let's go to this light. Delete that crap. Just broke my matte cap. It's the one thing you got to be careful with these matte cap materials. So once you override them, they gone. So we can maybe just use the poly sculpt here or whatever. But with a standard, you can basically go in and you can create light caps from an image. So if you click turn on an image and then you go into light caps, it basically creates points from that, which will give you the ability to, kind of like change the lighting configuration of that scene, right? But that's pretty much all you get. I don't know what kind of customizations you like. Creating a standard material is basically just like if you take the skin shade and you modify a bunch of this stuff and you save it out as a different name, you can load that in, and it's the skin shade with a different configuration basically, which is a lot of what, like, the difference between let's go to light caps and delete all these guys. You'll see the light caps are global, so they affect all the standard materials. So the difference between like skin shade and the basic material isn't much. It's just different ambient, different diffuse, different specularity. Those settings are just a little bit different. And then of course, like adding some color, you have channels here that run into these channels up here. So that's pretty much the extent of what you can do with the standard, on top of being able to go through and introduce lights to the scene, which can help affect how a standard material looks. But hopefully that's somewhat helpful. Alright, so I like my edges being shown off, so let's go back here and go back to my scene. So I got all my parts scaled in position, and if you guys got more questions, I'm happy to answer. Ivan, looks like that I got what you needed. Shingo, hey, what's going on? I'm great. How are you? I'm safe. Well, hopefully you're safe and quarantined like the rest of us. Animator saying is KeyShot on the same level as Substance or Mari. Yeah, Sculpts, try that stuff out. If you have other questions, I'll be streaming a lot more in the future too. So specific questions next time, I'm happy to or if you come up with one now, I'm happy to go through it. Yeah, Animator, your question was, is KeyShot the same level as Substance or Mari? I mean, I think they're different. They're different things. KeyShot is now heading into the sector of low poly models and low poly rendering, that kind of stuff. I would say they are a wonderful tool, especially in regards to like not having to deal with resolution or count, and you can send anything over from ZBrush or anywhere else, and you don't have to deal with that stuff. It works very well. It's CPU based and it's smooth. They're new to the game in terms of real-time rendering and that kind of stuff. Substance to me is those are another kind of beast too. Substance, generally speaking, is more of like a creative tool to assign shaders and paint and all of that, which KeyShot doesn't necessarily offer as much. ZBrush allows you to paint to your models and send that to KeyShot, which is a great combination. Mari is a totally different monster in terms of the film industry. That's a really high grade, super high resolution texturing tool that's used a lot on visual effects and film, and a lot of TV, movie, Game of Thronesy kind of stuff. Like, they need Mari to that level. Substance to me is more accessible to the high-end stuff, but also to the low-end stuff. So I'd say KeyShot and Substance are closer together, but in my opinion, whatever's been out the longest is going to be a little bit more well-versed in it, but not to say that KeyShot isn't a wonderful tool. It's hard to say. I don't really have a preference. I think they all work in different ways and are great for different things, but in my opinion, KeyShot's great for ZBrush, especially. Shingo, you're saying in your country you don't have a full quarantine, but no, you can't go out past 6. Well, I'm glad you're okay, and yeah, the quarantines are necessary. Which country are you in? While I'm waiting for that, and I'm happy to keep answering questions. I will come back to those questions shortly. I just want to do one quick thing. And just a quick shout out, if you guys want to follow me on Instagram, I can message you guys there. I'm on ZBC. If you guys are anybody who's new, ZBrush Central, you'll find me as Solomon_Blair. So you'll notice any of us Pixelogic employees, we should be labeled as orange. But this post here, if anybody who's just checking in on ZBrush Central, you'll find I'm doing a breakdown of all this stuff. All the videos are here as well. You can also find the replays here on ZBrushLive.com, which I posted the link in the chat. So to wrap this guy up, we got all of our parts, and now I want to export these out for print. So this is where Scale Master is going to be perfect to kick this stuff out. So I'm going to dock Scale Master to the right. There's Subtool, the Z plugin palette, and then let's bring up Scale Master. So I'm going to select the build plate, and I'm going to click sliders to subtool size to make sure these are the correct dimensions. We're still in the right space. Sometimes if you save the scene out and close ZBrush and come back later, the set scene scale may not be set to the accurate one. So one thing I can mention here is, let's just like have one part here, is select that build plate. We know that if you follow along, that build plate was 11 by 6 by 6-ish. So if we, just to double check to make sure it's properly oriented to scale, if I click set scene scale, I should find the 11 by 2 by 6.1 by 6. I'm going to click that, and that's going to make sure that that scene is in those proper dimensions. So now when I go through, and you'll see in Scale Master, we have at the bottom, we have export to unit scale. So we've been working in inches because I'm one of these few crazy people in the US that uses inches, and everybody else is, you know, working in millimeters and the metric system as a whole. We are the, I don't even know what they're calling it these days, the imperial system. It formerly was imperial. Anyways, most software that deals with printers, they're working in metric, so they're using millimeters usually, right? So when I export this, the great thing about the Scale Master plugin is if you were to change this to millimeters and you click sliders to subtool size, it's going to do the conversion for you. So 11.2 inches is 284.4 millimeters. So it updates that in the plugin in real time. So if I click inches and I click sliders to subtool size, it'll update that for you. So it can do it here, and then on export, basically what it's going to do is do that conversion. So if I change it to millimeters, I'm going to select this helmet, or this piece of the helmet. I'm going to click export to unit scale. So I made a quick folder on my desktop, which is part 1 through whatever, like all these parts. So let's just do a new folder. Let's do Mando ZBrush print files group 3. So I'll start a new group here. I've been trying these out this week just to make sure I got this stuff ready for the stream. So I'm just exporting OBJ. If you want to change it, you can do STL, you know, whatever it is that you need. STL, Vermal, those might be, you know, better for other formats. But in where I'm going to simplify 3D, they'll take any of those. So I'm going to do just straight OBJ, and OBJ will keep the scale for the file format as well. So I'm going to export that piece. Now I'm going to go. Let's just go do another one. Select this guy. So I'm changing it to millimeters here. It's still in inches displaying here, but in millimeters it's exporting in those dimensions, or that unit of measurement. And then let's just leave it as a couple pieces because I'm running out of time here. I gotta finish this up by 2 today. So the couple parts, we're gonna do that for all these pieces that we've aligned and oriented. Now what I'm going to do is go into, let's just take a look at this in Simplify. So I'm going to launch Simplify 3D. Now if you set up in the process settings, they have an option to choose different types of printers. You can make a new profile that has basically all existing printers out there. So I'm using the MakerBot replicator, which is basically showing me the exact what the build plate looks like. Like I got this thing sitting out in the cubicles and it's running right now. This is exactly it. And this is the space I have to work in. So then to set this up, if I go to File, Import, I'm going to navigate to that folder, and let's bring in part 1. Now you'll see the time that it takes for this thing to come in. Not too bad actually. Software used to be a lot slower, you know, 10 years ago. But in this case, it comes in relatively fast. But one thing that you can do, if we go back to this piece here, is you'll see the active point count is 1.176 million. So this thing has been dynameshed. It's been put through the ringer basically with all kinds of remeshing and all that jazz. So if you take a look at that surface, it's pretty dense, right? And it's got all the boolean stuff. So one thing we could do to, if the files are too dense, if you're working on another project, we can go to Decimation Master, and we can pre-process the object, which will take, it depends on how many points it has. If it's 10, 20 million, it might take 20 seconds. This should take 5 seconds or so to pre-process. Okay, so that's done. So once you've done a pre-process, now you can decimate the model. So you can decimate it from 20% of 1.17 million. So if I decimate it, it's going to take it down to 20% of that, which is 235,000. So if you turn on polyframe, you go from this to this, and you get a nice clean decimation. So if you guys are familiar enough with ZBrush, this is one of the great tools we've had around for a really long time to reduce the point count while keeping the detail. So what you'll see is you get smaller tries in areas that have more complexity on the surface, bigger tries in smooth surfaces that it doesn't need those edges. So you'll see these edges here, you get a nice clean dense set of tries, so it keeps those details really nice. So if I undo, that's 1.17, redo, that's 235,000. You don't see any real change at all, which is pretty amazing. So now if you go back to Scale Master, let's just do export again. I'll replace part 1. Also, the export goes out way quicker. Let's delete this guy, go File, Import, and this one should be like pretty fast. There you go. So fraction of the time. So one little tip. And then now I'm just going to go through. You'll see that the position in ZBrush space, I'm looking at Z-axis facing me, the helmet's facing here. In this case, it's coming in essentially their Z-axis is looking from the top. So this is what Chris was actually mentioning before. He was asking about the axis space itself. So what we could do is, maybe going back to that topic, if we just simply take, let's go here. Maybe this is a little experimentation. I actually haven't tried that. So Z-axis is facing up for their bed. So if we want all this stuff to be facing up, let's turn all these parts on. And I'm going to turn on Gizmo. So let's see, hold on, how is this working? So let's just try this. We'll turn on Transpose All. So with Gizmo on, you can turn Transpose All. If you don't select anything, you can just simply go in with Rotate and hold Shift, and we can rotate all this stuff 90. And then make sure to turn that off, because otherwise you're going to move all your stuff together. Side effects are some of Mandalorian Z Blacksmith. Yeah, that's oh man, that is like the greatest compliment ever. Outside of Joseph Dress, one of our other developers here, we were chatting on Slack yesterday, and he was saying his son Leo was like saying how much this looks like the original helmet, and he's like, yeah, Saul made that. He was geeking out about it. It's like, man, if kids are into this, then I'm doing something right. Okay, so but I just rotated that to the Z-axis. Now, one more time, if I go export this to unit scale, go to part 1. Let's replace that file. Go to File. So I just re-angled the space. Go to part 1. Now I should get that thing in the direction that I did it in ZBrush. Boom. I love that. That feels great. So then you could use ZBrush to orient this stuff. Otherwise, you can use Simplify, or any of these programs are going to work for it. I like to do everything in ZBrush, but if I double click the layer, I can go in and do like rotations here. I can play around with the angle in which this stuff is sitting, and I can also click center and arrange, which will put it in the dead center. So stuff like that. So I'll leave it as is. And then what I'm doing is trying to just configure the fastest possible build with the best quality that I can get. So in the edit process, I've been experimenting with different levels of infill percentage. This is if you've printed enough. A lot of you guys seem like you do. Decreasing that number, you can speed up the time. Like if I do it at 10% with a raft in supports, which I recommend, let's do prepare. And this is going to give me the estimation of time. So 10% is giving me 15 hours and 32 minutes for this build, which is, decent amount of time. If we go back to edit this thing, let's take this down to 5% infill. Click OK. We could probably shave off maybe 4 hours. Nope, just kidding. That's still about 15 hours and 14 minutes, so not any major change. But those are things that we have to play around with. We can also start to, mess around with speed. Like this is set to fast. If I do it on medium, oh gosh. Let's go prepare. I'm just curious what a medium one's going to do. While that thing is calculating, one thing I'll mention is I did do this piece at 5% infill, and I did it on fast quality with Simplify. And overall, the surface here, like this is the second piece, surface here, I got some little striations in here, which I could fill in with primer and clean up a lot of that stuff. But what I ran into with the 5% infill was this. So pulling this thing off of that print bed, you see this piece is basically busted. So that 5% infill didn't really give me a lot of wall thickness to hold that shape, and when I pulled it off the print bed, I just ripped this thing off on accident. So some parts I can get away with, like this one I did at the same settings, 5% infill, and this one is super clean, and I got all the stuff I need. I can sand and clean up anything, but I don't have any real major issues. So I'm going to have to pick and choose which parts I'm going to do at that lower quality, but this one, technically speaking, is good to go, so I can save that toolpath, and I'm just exporting out those X3G files, and we are good to go. Yeah, battle damage, right? It's like, yeah, I mean, this is, I don't know, the Simplify does it's a cool little algorithm that they're trying to calculate the cost. I don't know how accurate that is. That'll probably depend on what kind of material you're getting, but I'm just buying PLA for now. It's just prototypes straight from Amazon. I'll probably try and do an ABS version as well, just to kind of play around with, like someone earlier was suggesting ABS is better for sanding, which is a good tip, and that is true. There's a whole debate on, not really debate, but what was formerly good PLAs used to be a lot more durable, would last longer in terms of time, but I think there's a lot of things happening with ABS and things like that are getting better. But I'm not a pure expert on the materials, but I know PLA looks good, and overall I like the surface that I get. They manage differently in heat as well. I know that plays a big part, so if it's going to be like outside a lot, you might want to choose materials wisely. But overall, this stuff's looking pretty good. And this is essentially what you can do with ZBrush to kind of go through and get this stuff working. In a nutshell, I really am done with these parts. One thing I do want to mention here, kind of going back to, just for example, if let's say, I'm going to pull these two guys back up again. The issue that I'm running into with these curves or these slices not being flush, so having too much space, that has to do with the keys. So if those keys, for example, in this case, I didn't properly estimate the distance or the scale factor between the two, if I need to go back and make modifications to it, I mentioned to you guys earlier that quick scaler plugin that Joseph wrote is a really fantastic tool. We can go back to the key tool, which is set up here, and let's just like click this guy, turn this off, and take a look. So it would be all the additives, like let's say, I don't know, let's go back to these top pieces here, this one and this one. All the additives are going to go, if those needed to be just a tiny bit smaller to leave more space, what you can do is start by selecting one. You can go, this is where quick scaler, it works based on isolation. So if you just do decrease scale with both visible, they're both going to go down. But if you mask one off, inverse, decrease scale, you see it does it there. So let's just say I want to figure out, I want to do, for all these, I want to do maybe 5% less. So we'll set this to 5. And I can go to mask this part off. You could split these things off into their own subtools. That works okay too, but some of them are grouped. So I can inverse, decrease that 5, inverse that, decrease that 5. Go here down the list and just do boom, boom. So pretty easy. All right, so I can slightly go through and just readjust all those scales, just a tiny bit. That to me was a game changer. Just to be able to do that makes a big difference. Otherwise, your best option here is, let's say we go back to this one here. You'd have to do this manually for each one. So you go up to the object here. If you mask it off, inverse, turn on gizmo, alt-click to the center, and then refresh the gizmo just to be safe. Now, if I hold shift and drag on the yellow square, that's going to give you just below, you'll see you get the percentage. So you can go down 5%, 10, 15, whatever, and then it's going to go through and apply that. Now, I'd have to go through and do that to each individual one, which is a lot of steps. So Quick Scaler is a really awesome feature for that, and should help a lot. Winston, I'm assuming you're talking about Quick Scaler is useful. Yeah, I'm glad to show this to you, if that's what you're saying is useful, because yeah, this to me is a great one. Joseph did a great thing creating this little feature. It's so handy. And we were just talking about some new things to maybe add to this as well. Just slight little improvements we can do with the object. So that'll be, I'm sure he'll be writing an update for that soon. I'm going to check on these comments, see if you guys have any questions. I got to kill this thing pretty soon. If you guys have questions or whatever, I'm here for another 5 minutes or so. Ivan saying, is the life of a 3D modeler rewarding? Is that a question or a statement? If that's a question, yeah, Guardian's got some good tips on these materials. ABS can warp more, which when I was talking about materials, yeah, that was one I was thinking of, is it can warp, which the rigidity of the surface, I guess, is something to consider. But Ivan, to your, if that is a question, is the life of 3D modeler rewarding? In my opinion, it's one of the most rewarding things I could ever do. But I mean, I host the ZBrush podcast, so if you go to zbrushlive.com and you go to the podcast, you know, we sit with all these artists that are professionals. We're on iTunes. It's all on YouTube, so you can watch them here on YouTube, get them on iTunes, other places online. But I started off, I always want to know, like, sitting with artists like myself, like, how do you even get into 3D modeling as a whole? I feel like some of us gravitate towards it. I feel like, for me, when I was a kid, I loved to work with wood. I was always like, my aunts and uncles and my parents called me the duct tape king, because I would just duct tape stuff together and make things. Like, I was a builder. I loved to make stuff. And when I got introduced to 3D modeling, for me, it was the most rewarding thing. It was a career path that I was allowed to be creative. I can work in this industry and work on a tool and help make a tool like ZBrush, and I get the most out of it. So for me, it's absolutely, I get to fulfill all the things that I need to get out of my day. I'm a creative person, so I need it. So if that's something that you resonate with, or that works for you too, then yeah, I think it's the best career you could probably pick, because you are sort of the master of your own domain to a certain extent. If you work for a studio, you got to make other people's stuff. But us at Pixelogic making ZBrush, we are helping to sort of facilitate all of you creative people and all the different ways that you make stuff too. So I love that. Yeah, Pre-Dragon. Literally the duct tape king. If I can ever get my mom in this stream, she'll go on and on and on about it. I always have a roll of duct tape still in my trunk in my apartment. I've since learned to not use it out in like the open, so I used to use it on stuff in like my room. Now it's like you got to keep that stuff hidden. Sheldon, you're asking if I've ever made toys or other cosplay items. Yes, I have. I've done freelance in the past. I'll do freelance every once in a while, making toys, that kind of stuff. A lot of that stuff is very protected, so it's impossible to really share. But companies like Hasbro and other toy manufacturers, they all use ZBrush. Speaking of that, a great person who talks about that, we had this podcast from the summit last year, Paul Bennett, this is an awesome episode. I personally feel didn't get enough attention just with all the craziness going on. Paul is like a senior artist over there. He makes toys, and he talks a lot about, he gave a presentation which is also available on our YouTube channel. So if you go to his podcast, I recommend you watch this one. This dude's so cool and so humble and informative on the process that they have to apply in making toys. But also, if you go to, yeah, it looks like YouTube is smart checking me here, and here's his presentation. Hasbro Toys. This is from the ZBrush Summit that we put up. He talks all about the real technical processes, getting into like the really complex keys, the ball joints. This stuff is pretty sophisticated, but he's doing so much of it with ZBrush, and you'll see like a lot of these really complex keys. I'm doing the most basic stuff here, just plug and play. What he's doing is real articulation and real manufacturing processes that they use at Hasbro for all their toys and other companies as well. So I've had a chance to, work on some of these things. I don't do a lot of times. The people that do those kinds of things, they're more engineer based, and they're doing a lot of CAD programs to get a lot of it. But in ZBrush, to a certain extent, you get a lot of these things straight in ZBrush as well. Let's see, Octopus actually. Oh, sorry, that's an extension. You got introduced to ZBrush when you were a kid, a demo thing. Yeah, I was similar. Z-Spheres was one of the first ones where they had these step-by-step things. You learn to make a squid or an octopus. That's so funny. Yeah, that's like Z-Spheres was about. I started in ZBrush 3 when I was in high school, and yeah, I was 16 maybe at the time, 17, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I loved what I could do with it. I think the first sculpt I ever did was Kratos from God of War. This is the very first sculpts, which was like based on the original quality of the game character, so it looked more like this back then. Yeah, it was like this. Now also speaking of that, on that note, I did an episode for Pixelogic with Rafael Grassetti, who is art director at Sony, Santa Monica Studios or Sony Studios. I forget what they've changed the name to, but he was the art director for God of War. So this episode is with one of the best sculptors in the ZBrush game that has since worked on the most recent Kratos, which is the one you see, God of War. I guess it's just the new God of War doesn't have a number. This one here, right? So this is Grassetti and his team. I forget who's responsible for all of the work, but yeah, anyways, that was like my first sculpt. That's cool that you did a squid. I love that. The Z-Spheres are still functional and useful today. I use them all the time. So that's one of the great things about ZBrush is we don't really get rid of much, so everything's still there. Yeah, Pre-Drag, you watched that episode. I appreciate that. It was a good one. And Raf's getting into 3D printing himself. We had a lot of conversation about that. Alright, everyone, I think it's about time for me to go. I need to get some lunch. Hopefully I've answered everyone's questions. Before I go, shoot me a follow here on Instagram. We can connect if you haven't. I'm always free if you want to send me messages. I'm also readily available on ZBrush Central. So if you guys aren't here, a lot of us at Pixelogic are going to be spending a lot of time in the forums, especially now that we have this new platform. I did mention I have a post here. If I just go to my gallery real fast, if you tuned in late, there's a full breakdown of this. I'll be posting more of this process here. This is my last stream for this particular project. I think 4 parts is a lot. It's too much, I think. You guys have all been really great at. Seems that a lot of you have been coming back and checking it out, which I love. It keeps me going. But I want to try and get these project-based series going, maybe within 3 parts. So the goal will probably be to start a brand new project or maybe continue. But all this stuff, everything I'm going to do with the prints, I'll be posting updates here, the painting and finishing as I keep. Especially now that we're all going to be quarantined and things, I think I'll have a lot more time at home to be, painting and working in the back of my apartment. So I'll have some space and time to finish that up. So I'll post that here on ZBC. So give me a follow. And if you aren't on ZBC, make an account. It's a great place, especially to get tips and questions and communicate with people or share your work, get featured on Top Row. We're working really, really hard to make ZBC a more active space to communicate with, and I'm going to be here a lot. So hit me up there as well. If you don't already, get me on Instagram. And I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Thank you so much. Everybody be safe. My pleasure to stream. I'll be back on in 2 weeks, so twice a month. looks like this is the end of March. I'll be on whatever April. It'll be on the schedule and ZBrushLive.com coming up soon, but guaranteed twice a month. And again, be safe. We'll talk to all you guys next stream, and take care. Cheers.